Imagine being madly in love with a woman who ultimately betrays you, with your best friend, and which is also the responsible for your death, with the purpose of keeping all your resources. However, at the last second, a force of the most, there you are brought back to life and you swear, collect everything they did to you. So with nothing more to say, let's start. The story begins under a red moon. Intense that is, looms over a city in ruins, desolate and filled with the waste of a destroyed. Our main character named Sunan is wounded, covered in blood and torn apart. From a distance, demonic forces irrepressible chaos without showing the slightest mercy towards the few survivors. Its powerful footprints and muscular bodies are in charge of skyscrapers transforming concrete into powder. In command of these creatures, an army of zombies, subhuman flesh so panic. And the lucky few, who still breathe, try to escape by clinging to a hope that is felt unreachable, while our Pertat is constantly beaten and crushed against the ground. A girl laughs out loud at her bad luck and mercilessly begins to spray it with gasoline, soaking it from head to toe. That woman exchanges teasing with a green-haired guy, proudly displaying his precious booty. This man is the villain who has dispossessed sound of what I treasured most, the talisman of the six great hells. Looking at the man he once considered his great friend, Sunan feels the burning of gasoline in his wounds, and his mind focuses solely on the welfare of his younger sister, who has disappeared in all this chaos. Without wasting any more time, that guy activates the talisman, summoning an imposing bear adorned with skull necklaces, and bragging about its power, reveals that Sunan's sweet sister has already been sent to its dreadful destination as an obstacle. And even though rage floods our main character, your body does not respond, and has no strength to stand up, let alone to fight. The survivors trying to escape look at a kind of green hair with hatred and recognize him as a Chujin, the most powerful favored by the gods. In that while Chujin lifts the broad in the air, she leaves Sunan with a cruel reminder of their encounter, a lit lighter intended to incinerate him alive. The tremendous demon continues its path of destruction until to run into the huge bear that has been summoned, who without hesitation confronts the gray demon. And that's how it gives beginning of a titanic confrontation between great heroes. At the same time the infernal flames, Sunan's body caught, and because of the intense pain in his burning skin, grits his teeth longing for a new opportunity. Promises that if there is a beyond, will not forgive those who made him suffer. I have driven by rancor, and torment his eye. Bright merges with fire when it hears a voice, playful that grants her wish. And yet his heart beats slowly, and in a last effort time seems to go backwards. Ignia energy is concentrated in your eye, while the pain, physical and emotional that it has endured remains. Believe in your being. Suddenly in that ring awake in the warmth of your own bed, bathed in sweat, as if he had had a long and feverish nightmare. Burns and wounds are gone, and wonders if it could be real. The voice he heard on the brink of death. Immediately to get out of doubt, grab your phone and see the current date on your screen. Realizing that he has gone backwards for 3 days, before the apocalypse. Quickly dressing up, he runs to the bathroom to clear his head, trying to make sense of what he has experienced. And found it hard to believe it all happened again. Felt very normal. But the only anomaly was his right eye, which now shines in dim gold. Result of the fire seed that lodged in the greenhouse. Consumed by the flames, Sunan takes a moment to calm down, and adapts quickly to its new reality, and without hesitation dresses and leaves the house. By taking its first steps in the outdoors, looks at his neighborhood, and mentions that it is not that their environment is beautiful, but in 3 days it will be much worse. The apocalypse is approaching, turning many humans into zombies, and bringing, I meet strange deities. Some humans will awaken abilities to protect themselves, but in the end resistance will be Moscow, and cities will become hellish landscapes, invaded by demons, with a few struggling for scarce resources to survive. And he knows very well that his girlfriend, who is the girl who ended the call, Roland, and his best friend, Chujin, will betray him without hesitation. Talking about the same person. Just at that moment, Roland started calling it to what it sounds like. Answered the phone, and voice shrill from it immediately echoed, criticizing him for not responding immediately, insinuating that perhaps he was looking for a way to put end to their relationship. The Proto remembered that Roland had always been like this, and every time things did not march as she wished, threatened to end. to the relationship in the past. Her version was insecure and was trying to please her. But that belonged to another time. Now a new determination filled Sunan, who felt indifferent to his reproaches. And I thought she was absolutely right. What left Roland perplexed? She expected that he, like a puppy, repentant to beg him for his forgiveness. However, the scenario had changed as they played. I was determined to close this chapter. Was tired of his behavior. Manipulative and no longer wished to be just another in his work. So hung up the call and put the phone in his pocket, enjoying a brief but precious moment of peace. And I knew I had to rush and attend his business before his time ran out. At Roland's house the fury was consumed by the and threw his phone after the breakup and began to curse Sunan with all its strength, mentioning that this insolent man had had the nerve to recharge them and block her with a speed that turned her stomach. Roland and Shugen had just been together, and the curious asked him if they had discovered his little deception, even though he told himself that this should not be possible, as he had always had that looser under his control, yielding to each of his whims, and mentioned that your attention was more focused on a message from her father, on the collection of old family heritages brimming with spiritual energy, that something transcendental could be about to happen. Hearing this, Roland recalled that his nanny had mentioned a family talisman. However, the bad was that the artifact now belonged to his sister. But since she was convinced that the Pertat would return like a dog, decided it was time to demand the talisman in exchange for reconciliation. In fact, the talisman in question was an ancient piece of earthenware, in a very delicate state. Sunan had traveled more than 30 kilometers by cab to his sister's school, leaving his daily work just to request the talisman. When she arrived, she asked him what was wrong with his eyes, to which he refused to give explanations for the time being, preferring to know if she trusted him. Had always maintained an incredibly strong bond from an early age, so of course she trusted her older brother. Had been playing each other throughout their lives, and if there was someone in whom Xiaoyuan could place his trust without reservation, was his older brother, and she knew that everything he did was for his welfare. So with this certainty, Sunan asked him to quickly pick up his things and joined him, to which she accepted without hesitation, but asked for 2 hours to prepare. When he heard this, he questioned why I had not asked for further clarification. But as I had said before, Xiaoyuan trusted his brother greater than anyone else in the world, and while she hurried to pack, the Perta mentioned that this time he would protect his sister less at all costs. So to achieve this, needed that familiar artifact that I had in his hands. All I remembered was Chujin opening a portal and summoning a creature gigantic with that old rusty thing, and wondered how he had achieved that, to materialize such a mythical act. Suddenly, in that a spark burning in his golden eye, he shot himself towards the object, impacting its surface. The intense heat of the fire melted the oxidized outer layer, discovering the authentic form of the artifact. This ancient object was linked to the sixth hell, and in an instant, Sunan was sucked into a type of wormhole, going through an alternative dimension related to the object. The portal finally expelled him in a world completely different, wrapped in eternal darkness. In the heart of this place, an immense tower stood, tied with countless red chains stretching in all directions. And at that moment the words stuck in his throat as he contemplated what he had in front of him. Inside that tower, there was a tumult of heroes and demons in various ways, trapped and crying out to escape. Everyone watched him with glances as he descended toward the entrance, and the infernal beings tried to scare him with their grunts and threatening looks, and they more than made it. Suddenly, in that a lightning storm hit the tower with enormous power, and lightning seemed to be headed specifically the savages who dared to challenge Sunan. Each of them met an agonizing death, dismembered by energy, devastating they ate its grotesque forms. And the storm continues to recede, apparently connected to the Prota, and in turn, a mysterious force was dominating the savages captured in the tower. At that instant, Sunan heard a similar playful voice to which he had heard before his life was extinguished in time. The lips of that thick entity curved into a gallery, showing their sharp fangs, and ringing alert focused his attention on the humanoid figure before him. She immediately became known as Sudajaya, beautiful nine-tailed bitch. and extended a respectful greeting to Sunan, whom he now considered the new guardian of the underworld. Tens of thousands of years ago, the immortal emperor gathered 12 immortal beings. Among them was Tai Bai Tai Tun Sein Huan Yin, Tu Sin, and others, to create together the tower of their demon pressure. The final result became known as the Sixth Great Hell, a nightmare for all evil over the centuries. So many beasts, powerful as princesses and demons, have been locked up here for their terrible sins and pain. Constant torments under celestial lightning baited their souls day and night. And she indicated that the talisman of forgiveness in his hand was the only key that can open the door to this place, the earth. That's why Sudahai called him the new prison guard. As was his first visit to this place, Sudahai helped him enter and examine the prisoners, promising to provide you with a more detailed report, which the protagonist was intrigued by everything he saw, accepted the invitation without hesitation, and that's how he headed for the sinister door. As if I had nothing to lose. As soon as you crossed the portal, was greeted by a dance, erratic violent energy bouncing off the second floor, and Sudajaya warned him about the energies. Dancers immediately. Instinctively his golden eye shone and generated a fire barrier that protected it from the malevolence that surrounded him, and upon witnessing the Sudajaya was impressed. For the ability with which he inaugurated the first test of the tower, identified the flame in his eyes like the seed of fire of the underworld, a catalyst that had allowed him to reborn after her death. Also she revealed that he had tried to contact him at the moment when his life was going out, and mentioned that he had a strong connection to his family, had been the guide spiritual of the Sixth Great Hell for centuries, and couldn't bear to see Sunan be eliminated by despicable beings. She also pointed out to him that her desperation and anger, at its last moment, should have evaded their firefighting ability, lighting the sea of fire of the underworld. Hearing all this, the Purtat realized that this was the reason for his rebirth, and told himself that as he came along, a new apocalypse would not feel more powerless as in the past. Since this time, I was determined to do things differently. Eager to learn more about the Sunan Tower, asked Sudajai to continue and show him the way. To which she began to explain that the Sixth Great Hell is divided into 5 levels, each related to the power of Sunan's soul. Doors to the upper floors would light up, showing its current limits, and as you move forward you will find increasingly powerful beings, which means that you will need to increase their spiritual strength quickly to face them. But at this time, only the lowest level is illuminated, and the only access it has is to the lower floor. Suddenly in that the Purtat realized that behind one of the flies was a figure that was disturbingly familiar to him. Was the same giant beast that Shujin had summoned in his past life. Darkness pushed its lullaby closer to darkness. What awakened the boy, who emitted a terrifying roar of war? What happened next stunned him. Since the creature, colossal, began to behave like a domestic animal, clearly happy to see the new prison keeper. The beast praised Sunan for his youth and potential, mentioning that the prisoners of the tower had been waiting for millennia the arrival of a new jailer. The beast even offered to help Sunan in whatever he needed, and taking the opportunity he tried to give her a kiss. But it was quickly set aside by Sudojai, who did not want competition for the attention of the new guardian. She complained that these demons, despite having been locked up, only a few thousand years old, they already behaved as if they were animals, hungry for affection. But not everyone shared this perspective, as some prisoners disapproved that the young man guardian to rely exclusively on his object, and it was a chained bird demon, who mentioned that he would rather be beaten by celestial storms for 1,000 years more than submitting to the child, telling Sudajai to the black bear. It seemed that the tower housed an infinite number of beings, and the Proto let his gaze to walk around the site until he stopped at the black bear. There he spotted a muscular demon with spectacular wings, which by turn showed a humanoid face with a sharp beak. Immediately rang tribute to the god of the ancient legends called Lungi, and Sudoja congratulated him for having identified another prisoner with just a glance. She commented that in this world, creatures that are considered to be championships are organized into different categories, such as general soldiers, wise king commanders among others, and since they could only access the lowest level of the tower, his vision was limited to general ranking criminals. and told him that over time and as his power grows, we'll have the opportunity to meet with strongest prisoners. It was said that at the highest level, immortal criminals of holy rank were living there. Sudoja had narrated to Sunan who, as he heard in times past, the tower had been home to divine beings, although these had vanished over time. She asked that to strive and promote in order to gain total control about the prison. However, they play was by the magnitude of this responsibility, since the tower was much scarier than they had imagined. This one was aware that the creatures at the lowest level already possessed sufficient power to cause great destruction, and the prisoners from the upper levels had to be authentic nightmares capable of sweeping the world. However, he reflected that it did not matter how terrifying those creatures were, as they would all be under his control in the future, and mentioned that in the next apocalypse could become the strongest, despite his limited spiritual power that he possessed today. That was all for now. But I knew I needed to absorb much more power, spiritual, to open more rooms and advance Sudai. Also pointed out to him that spiritual power differs from the abilities that can be awakened, as skills are strengthened by absorbing crystal cores of zombies and mutants, while the power of the soul can only be obtained by defeating gods. But in 3 days those gods will reach land and the Perta will begin its hunt. Sinimbarco was aware that before confronting them it was crucial to be well prepared. Sunan was already on a bustling street of antiques. In his previous life, someone had bought an immortal princess in one of the stalls, which allowed him to become a formidable user of skills. At that time, this treasure was supposed to should still be available on the street. Unfortunately, the energy that emanating from antiquities was detectable, thanks to its seed of fire from the underworld. At that moment the head of the family, saint named Tianjin and father of Chujin, was also out and about in the street, accompanied by the elderly Pankit's expert antiquities appraiser. Noticing Suyan, Tianjin was surprised to see that the young man was showing interest in objects, and at that he remembered to have advised his son to choose friends that could be useful. Tianjin had assured him that Sunan, he was just a loyal and easy to handle guy. So without giving it much importance, Tianjin continued his search for valuable antiques, while the old man has assured him that with his insight could find objects of great value. However, most of the antiques proved to be uninteresting. And recently, Tianjin had returned from an ancestral ceremony, where I had dreamed that his ancestors told him to look for ancient artifacts, although I didn't understand exactly why. Suddenly in that the old man, Hank, was enlightened at the sight of a pumpkin tied to the door of one of the stores, and rushed to get it. But there was already someone who had arrived earlier. The store owner moved. He saw in his nanny another customer who was easy to deceive, and began to talk to him about how the pumpkin was an artifact of the dynasty Nen and valued it at 10,000 jones. At such a price the star, very surprised, reset it, and began examining the pumpkin for defects, arguing that it had cracks and was tied with a low-quality rope. That's how Sunan started haggling, proposing a maximum price of 100 jones. However, the owner, frustrated to hear his words, took away the pumpkin of his hands and asked him to get out of his sight. And at that instant the old man, Handy Tianjin, approached to examine the antiquity. Since Sunan had already obtained a treasure at no cost, which was a simple red arrow tied to the pumpkin. No one could have anticipated that this circumstance, apparently insignificant, would become an object of great value in the future, which was known as the rope that binds immortals. And Sunan detected it thanks to his special ability, the seed of fire of the underworld. While hiding the treasure in his cell, he decided to stay a little longer to enjoy and get some mischief. In that he recalled that his previous life was his sister had been captured by the family, San Shovar, an artifact, and had used it as a sacrifice in a sinister ritual. So this time they had the firm intention to make the whole family San to pay for it, and that the old man have, noticing the dull spiritual aura of the pumpkin, mentioned that this artifact must be many years old. To which Tianjin, trusting in his instinct, the price of the pumpkin rises, however, politely interrupted, waving to get the guy's attention. Sank, who spoke, and engaged in a brief conversation, mentioning that his son told him that he had a very old object at home, and asked him if they could reach an agreement. In response to this bold proposal, Sun Mian began to compete with all his might, insinuating that Uncle Sang. I was interested in something valuable. With streets full of people, looking to get rich in the antique markets. A crowd quickly gathered around the post, attracted by the presence of the renowned elderly man, Hank, since they knew that where he was there were valuable things. Immediately Puss began to offer higher and higher prices for pumpkin, quickly surpassing the 10,000 joans in the face of this An. Was irritated by the competition, and claimed that he had been the first to find the treasure. However, offers continued to rise, reaching 20,000, and in an opening, and the of an eye rose to 50,000. And while this was happening, the owner of the position benefited from the situation. At the end of the intense San had to disburse 70,000 more than he initially planned to spend. And what was to be a purchase of only 10,000 joans became a price exorbitant thanks to the cunning of the Pertat, who decided to stay a while longer to talk to Tinjin on his family's antique object. Upon hearing this, Uncle Sank dies cordially and asked the young man to show him the object, which Sunan pulled it out of his chest and showed it at some distance. Immediately the old man hacked, recognizing that it was a true treasure. I need to see it up close though. Sunan quickly saved the object by rejecting the request. Then, trying to appeal to the friendship between Sunan and his son, asked him for a favor for his dear uncle, but Sunan made it clear that he no longer had ties to Chujin, and that if there was nothing more to discuss, he would finally retire. Pemyat offered compensation just for inspecting the artifact. To what they add up to, took out his phone, showed his code, and asked for 10,000 yens for 1 minute of inspection, and also offered a 5-minute review in exchange for 50,000. And despite the fact that Tianjin was bursting with anger, and was accepting, and as soon as he transferred the corresponding money, Junan threw the object at the elderly Han. While they were examining the artifact, the Pertat was already busy spending his money, and ordered a large amount of water and food as he had empty doors in the prison of the sixth great hell where he could store his supplies. In that he recalled that Sudajite had explained to him that any object placed in a separate dimension would remain unchanged, and could even store some live animals. So he ordered some chickens to bite, bought as many supplies from fresh ingredients to perishable than the sellers. They thought I was starting a friendship, and it wasn't long before it ran out of funds. Realizing that money vanishes in a 2x3 way. 5 minutes later the Pertat addressed his partner to ask them if they wanted to buy a little more time, but Tianjin had already decided that the object would keep it. Hearing that Sunan was willing to sell, the joy of the hearts shone for a moment. But it soon went out when they found out about the price, as Sunan began negotiations, asking for 1 million yuan. The happiness they once had vanished instantly, and quickly recovering the Sunan object, explained that it was a family legacy that had been transmitted over 1,000 years. Even though he considered 1 million to be a fair price, it was clear that his offer was. So he proceeded to bid farewell. At that instant the old man was convinced that the object was a real seniority, but I believed that its real value was around 500,000, and thought they could get it for 100,000 if they negotiated. However, Tianjin, I was tired of this kind of treatment, and thanked the old man Han for his support, and asked him to leave later, called his son and gave him instructions for reuniting some family members, in order to locate Sunan and his sister, since its intention was to get hold of the object and the brothers intact, and as revenge for having been challenged by the Pertat, would comply with his family's long-standing demands, preparing a sacrifice with Sunan's blood. In the meantime, the star could already feel that Tianjin was up to something dark, and it was just what I had anticipated, and even lamented not having obtained any more money of that scoundrel, but barely was beginning to settle accounts for the family's actions. Jiang then went to his sister's room and found her waiting outside, ready to go with her grandmother. But just as they were about to leave, a woman with hair lead appeared running to stop them. It was his sister's grandmother named Cheyenne. She tried to catch her breath and asked why Cheyenne had suddenly woken up and left school, knowing that the next day had a crucial test for his future. Immediately Sunan presented himself to the crowd and explained that it was he who was taking his sister out for a temporary permit, to which the interpreter argued that Cheyenne was the best student in her class, and knew that his parents had passed away, and that Sunan was solely responsible for but I expected him to act as a responsible guardian, and not as someone that would his sister's future. So he refused to let go of his most promising student. Without a reason valid, since I believe firmly that Xiaoyun had a bright future ahead of him, and that his brother was ruining it. The passionate was convinced that unless the world was on fire there was no justification for Xiaoyun will take this temporary permission. But that's when he realized quickly that perhaps had crossed a line with his words. Although his intention was to protect his valuable student, despite feeling bad for having been involved in family matters, insisted that Xiaoyun's education should go ahead, to which the Perta, showing a great maturity, thanked the interpreter for her concern, and in a gesture of friendship offered him important advice, seriously recommended that he stock up on food, water, medicines and weapons in as many quantities as possible, and stressed the need to have a good reserve of painkillers to face the times the Chileanist misfortune was coming. Was surprised by the disturbing involvement in his words, as if it were really suggesting that something bad was going to happen soon. And that is how he left the princess in a state of confusion, while the brothers continued on their way. Upon arrival home, Xiaoyun asked his older brother what the plan was, now that she was present, and told her she was not stupid, since I knew that he was preparing for something important. Upon hearing this, that significant changes were coming. But he promised her that he would do everything possible to protect her. After saying this, took the talisman and turned it into a necklace, placing it towards Ojin before leaving for a moment, and warned him not to open the door to anyone without exception, which his sister with her usual optimism promised him that I would wait for him with a good meal when he returned. While the Proto was leaving, he knew perfectly that the necklace would allow him to locate his sister at all times, and mentioned that at this time, his priority was to obtain more resources as soon as possible. In that, when leaving the elevator, Sunan noticed that a woman was waiting for him in the lobby. She was talking to someone, plotting something against the Sun brothers. And on the other line was the traitor of Chujin, asking Roland to distract Sunan while he and his group carry out their plans. When the woman finally saw the protagonist, tried to use his charm, and invited him to dinner with Chujin as they used to do before, but they did not want to waste time with her, and simply pushed it aside. But Roland was incredibly persistent, or he simply did not understand the situation. So he him by the arm and came out. If they were really finishing, after all they had experienced together. However, Sunan pulled it away again. The Exolo idea that he had a relationship with her, he found it difficult to, disgusting, and warned her to stay away from him from. Of that time, however, Roland decided to take the lead and left him ungrateful. But the words that used to have power about the Prota no longer affected him, so out of the building I found the cunning Roland back, and how his pride had been completely shattered. Quickly returned to its natural form, mentioning that he was shameless but to shut her up. Sunan showed his home contract, its intention to sell it. Upon hearing this, she immediately went into a state of panic, as he expected to keep the house once they get married. And for some time now he had seen it as his future home. Not only Sunan had plans to sell it, but would do so at a price well below its value. Real, so I understand Roland, if you were interested in buying it. Her behavior left her quite puzzled, since I did not understand why all of a sudden wanted to sell the property left to him by his parents. The house, located in a privileged area, was worth at least 3 million, and that was its main objective. That's why he had messed with the Prota quickly. Roland changed his strategy and adopted a kinder tone, asking how much it costs. Sell it to facilitate the process, to which the Prota, I thought I would put it up for sale for only 1 million euros. Hearing this, Roland was stunned, thinking they must have been going through financial problems, and needed to sell the house to pay debts. The Prota continued to offer the possibility of selling a property so valuable at such a low price compared to the Roland witch, and she effectively wanted to buy it for herself, but still did not have the necessary capital. His only option was to offer him 300,000 entrance fee and pay the rest at a later date. But that did not seem acceptable to Sunan, since he wanted 1 million in cash. At that, Roland analyzed the situation, and knew that Chujin was about to mess with the brothers, and was practically at a dead end, and thought that even if she gave him 1 million right now, that would eventually come back to her. And I just need to find a way to trick him into to sign the transfer of ownership. Finally Roland accepted an agreement and sent it to the Office of Real Estate as soon as possible. There he made a call to his mother to get the rest of the money, him that he would recover it without any problem. However, her mother her for dating a poor boy, even for using their family savings to buy the house. Alok Roland almost screamed back at him, but managed to resist, since I thought Sunan would be gone forever, and ever very soon. In that the Prita asked Roland to speed up payment so that he could sign the property, which she, upon hearing this, thought he had already fallen into their trap, but not much. She knew that he was actually the one who was catching her, and that is how she made the corresponding transfer. However, the Prita, I knew that when the apocalypse finally arrived, all properties in the world will lose their value completely, and without the million that Roland had saved, it would look like deprived of resources and would lose his last chance at. But she smiled, while I had the property papers on it, and even invited him to return home for a celebration, which they without hesitation accepted the invitation. In the late afternoon, Shujin and his group of henchmen approached on the side of the rear of the Prita building. Before Sunan returned, they planned to have a very serious conversation with his sister. The innocent of Saudun was upstairs, preparing a dinner with care, outside what I was about to invent. Without her knowing, the pendant I was carrying began to vibrate with an energy unusual, and shortly thereafter the group led by Shujin arrived at the door of the apartment, which with its tone habitual knocked on the door and mentioned the name of Shoin, waiting for her to open, since he was a friend of his brother. When she heard the knock, she approached the door without rush to open it despite recognizing the voice, and told Shujin that his brother was not at home, and asked him why he was here to what the. Laughing mockingly, I told him that he already knew it, and assured him that his brother had gone out to buy ingredients for dinner, and that he had been sent home first. His words sounded credible to her, who had no idea of what was really going on the other side. So he unwittingly extended his hand to open the door, but suddenly he remembered his brother's warning about not opening, as always. That warning caused him to change his mind instantly, as he trusted his brother more than anyone else. By looking at Shujin, told him that he would have to wait for his brother to back. That answer infuriated Shujin, and in an opening, and his attitude friendly faded and its tone became threatening. Pretended to be offended because she did not trust him, and demanded that he open the door immediately. However, his behavior only reaffirmed the decision to avoid not opening. Realizing that his plan had failed, Shujin opted for more drastic methods. So he told one of his accomplices who had brought tools that will force entry. For them, opening locks was not mechanical, and a lock like that shouldn't survive long. While his friend struggled with the Shujin lock, began to ask Xiaoyun if he had his family's talisman with him, which she unsuspectingly replied that her brother I had barely given it to him. The aggressor's puzzling question was meaningless, as its sole objective was to divert the attention of Xiaoyun while his group was trying to force the lock. And in a matter of minutes they achieved their purpose. And this is how the gang of armed thugs fights. And broke with violence, and without hesitation he was captured. Towards Woyuni, Chujin began to flood it with insults, claimed that everything would have been much simpler if she had opened the door from the beginning, and immediately took that talisman, mentioning that this was the relic that his father so much I wanted, in addition to holding Sunan's sister hostage, and the only thing he needed was to force to the insolent to kneel and ask for forgiveness. When Seoyan managed to free himself from the aggressor's grip, asked Chujin why he was acting that way. Since he believed that he was a friend of his brother's, he did not bother to hide the truth, and ended with a laugh, deranged that she only approached her brother for being an easy target of manipulation, and did not hesitate to testify that he had committed numerous misdeeds that he planned to call Sunan. Upon hearing this, Doyan was stunned. But the reality was raw, since Chujin was a real shameless who glorified himself in his reprehensible acts, including his relationship with his brother's girlfriend. His caresses were repulsive, so that Seoyun demanded her release. However, their protests only exacerbated the situation, since in response to his plea, the latter gave him a slap and warned him not to dare to scream, or else I would pay very poorly for it. Shujin's accomplices were as despicable as he was. and began to wonder whether Xiaoyong was of legal age, to which he thought they could prove it themselves. No one knows how the story would have continued if it hadn't been for laughter, unexpected from a third individual. He turned to the group and asked them if they had ever had heard of the wine lake and the forest of meat. Barely uttered those words, the atmosphere seemed to transform before his eyes. Moments later, the young people found themselves by a lake, pictures of a gallery of dazzling girls. The atmosphere was so fragile, who did not question how they had arrived there, and without a place to. It certainly felt like a dreamlike kingdom. At least at first glance. The girls hugged them. They offered them meat, and called them kings. When asked if they enjoyed the meat, the heroes nodded, claiming that it was unfortunately surprising. Everything seemed to indicate that there was no danger in sight, until suddenly the atmosphere changed, and a white-haired girl with a mess captivating revealed that the meat they were tasting was hers in an open and of eyes. All the girls disappeared, and the water of the lake acquired a slow bloody tone on the limbs. Properties of the aggressors turned into fear, and terror and rejection they were enjoying became a real hell. And who was behind it all was nothing more and nothing less than Sudajay, who likes it if they didn't like the menu. While those guys were trapped in a world of illusions. In reality they suffered unbearable agonies. And I don't even realized that their punishment was just beginning. At that moment from a distance, Zhou was watching, trying to decipher what was going on. And finally the thugs regained their sanity, terrified by the apparition that presented itself to them. But they were still struggling to decipher where was the ghost of before and Shujin, despite the confusion that his colleagues yet on composure. However, the essence of the spectrum was disconcerting. And even though they had hunted down and taken many lives, innocent in the past, this time before the figure of the ghost woman, his bravery held in fear. It was at that moment that an idea crossed his mind, thinking that perhaps the key to their salvation resided in that mysterious object he carried. So with determination he took it out and started painting, mocking him as if he were a mere old thing trying to hurt him. However, the power latent in the object of the protagonist had different plans, and from him emerged a sharp claw that quickly made him. Shujin understood who the insect really was, leaving deep scars on his face, and could not help but scream of the great pain he felt, while leaving the talisman which rolled towards the feet of R, who without hesitation picked it up. He had returned to his apartment, just in time to face these criminals, and make them pay for their sins. And the Shujin ban soon became aware of the seriousness of his situation. But at that time, Roland appeared, demanding explanations as to what was going on there. When seeing seriously wounded Shujin threw himself towards him without hesitation, while the rest of the gang, Ichijin was beginning to regroup in it. Outburst of despair ordered them to prevent our Flota will escape with the treasure. Confident in their greatest number, the thugs went on the assault, anticipating a quick victory. However, our Prota stood firm at all times. Nevertheless, a warning from Sudoji resonated in his mind. She informed him that General Curvo had beaten Shujin in the face with its claw, acting without consent. What had exhausted the energy of the talisman, and the frustrated bear general wanted to intervene and demonstrate its true power. But that I could not, was a great relief for Sunan, since the apartment had appeared, would have succumbed to destruction. However, this stated that with his own ability was more than enough to dealing with this group of losers, and in an act of simplicity, I don't even need to move a finger to throw. He flamed towards those evildoers, which is in shock they could not understand what was happening, for they had never faced such excessive power. But in a matter of seconds you flamed them, began to consume them. The heat was completely unbearable, and not even water could, to appease the fire, no matter how desperate they begged for their salvation. The flames were extinguished only when they perished. And it was the first time that Shujin and Roland were witnesses of such an imposing spectacle, and the surprise left them speechless. At that moment Shujin experienced a real dread for its own existence, as he would never have conceived that his Nam possessed such powerful and fearful cognitive abilities. Roland implored the star to stay away, reminding him that Shujin was his best friend, and that she took her partner's place. However, the star was not willing to show no compassion for such undesirable beings, as Shujin had dared to invade his home to take to his sister as a hostage and attempt to steal an object from his family. While rolling, had tried to divert their attention to meet their objectives. Their mere presence provoked the Pertai. A deep and still dared to mention the ties that once brought them together and that Shujin rose up, trying to present himself as the most innocent of men, claiming not to understand Sunan's words, and at that instant whispered to Roland to act as a appealing to their romance. At the same time Shujin made a magic knife appear on his back and continued to, counting their longing to be the godfather at his best friend's wedding. To what they roll, joining forces, he succeeded the proto-marriage, and was even willing to ignore its fault of material goods. What actually she wished was to understand was the origin of her power, and then Ida would love him eternally. At first it seemed that his trap had worked, and Shujin envisioned an opportunity to attack. However, their attempt was in vain, as they could clearly see the real, hidden intentions behind this crude performance. So he prepared to face them immediately. At that a torrent of fire emerged from his look, catching the despicable burning couple. While watching all this, Shunin meditated on the reason for granting him such power of attorney, understanding that his mission was to, thanks to disgusting creatures like Shujin and Roland, and mentioned that he would not hesitate to convert into ashes to people, as they who are on earth, on the property of the same family. All members of the clan gathered to witness the speech of the will remain reverent to his ancestors. Sun bowed respectfully to the altar, begging for the venerated blessing of their ancestors in an attempt to expand their fortunes. And suddenly in that the spirit of this emerged, asking for old spiritual relics and the blood of a child in return. The beautiful old ass that Mr. Same had acquired for a high price it turned out to be insufficient to satisfy the spirit, and required true sacrifice and genuine relics. With great concern Tanjin tried to calm the situation, that it would soon arrive, shooting with the young woman and the necessary objects. However, the spirit, enraged by the wait, issued a warning that the apocalypse was approaching in only 3 days. Hearing this, Tanjin was perplexed, but understood that he had to act without hesitating the words of the. So he quickly summoned his clan, asking them to mobilize to acquire water and food in large quantities, because if the warnings, the end of the world, was true, was just around the corner. Also sent his assistant in search of his son, as soon as possible. Since the urgency of the sacrifice was paramount, the door of the farm was shattered and tsunami broke with a spectacular entry, bringing with him Shujin, whom he disjointly dissed. Mr. Sank was relieved to see his son, although he regretted his delicate condition, and very furious, he ordered his men to take down the Protap. This is how a large number of men launched themselves against, who laugh at the recklessness of these people. Closed his eyes and prepared to a scorching attack when the opened again the flames broke out around him, marking each opponent, and mentioned that from that moment on there was no escape. With impressive skill our Prota advanced. I would like the flames to devour those who tried to stop him, and in front of him was a Mr. Sam. Very terrified behind the sound of the smoking remains of the group, burned endlessly, and our main character was determined to make Tanjin pay for his actions. However, despite being cornered, he did not give up, and had one last ace under the sleeve, which was a pistol that he hurried to use. But just as he pulled the trigger they rang, manipulated the bullet fire, exploding the weapon into 1,000 pieces in the hands of Tianjin, who ended up with both hands badly injured. When we saw this our Ploto laughed at him, warning that he should not have played with fire if he was still a small child. And that's what they play at, mentioned for himself, that although it was only a top-level skill, just woken up, the power of the infernal fire was amazing. Was able to control 10 fire sources at a time, filling an area of up to 10 square meters. And if there were explosives near its power, could grow even more. While he was developing his strategies, Tanjin was very astute, and quickly addressed the altar to request the help of their ancestors, which the spirit could not allow. The last descendant of the family, San, was eliminated, so he used his fire power to attack Sunan. The strength of that flame, intensified by spirits, evil, was so formidable that our person could not fix it, and suffered severe damage and was forced to retreat. At the same time the wounds of Tianjin and his clan members were healed, giving them back the confidence and strength of their ancestors, and without hesitation Tianjin began to curse our Proto, mentioning to him that his ancestors would finish him off. This is how the spirit manifested itself in the form of a giant, and the Protat, upon seeing him, he mentioned that no wonder it seemed to him that the family San had previous knowledge of the apocalypse, as they had someone very powerful behind them. Immediately that spirit began to laugh, and then began to attack the Proto with heavy stomping, followed by a slap in the face that apparently hit the target, which made Tianjin laugh with joy, thinking that at last the Proto had perished. However, it remained completely stunned to see Sunan fully standing, and with a big scar on his face, riding a huge beast. Minutes before the Sudujai attack entered his mind and let him know that that spirit, called Sar Fire, is a spirit innate that for 1,000 years has accumulated an enormous amount of power, spiritual thanks to the offerings of the same family, and told him that if they manage to capture him and absorb his power, their skills, both in spiritual energy and in fire control, will increase enormously. Hearing all this, Suman asked him what he was planning, to which she let him know that for now the spiritual power of the great talisman was enough. But he told him that if he dared to take a little more risk, could have a great opportunity for success, which the Prota asked him how he could do to what he. Sudujen mentioned to him that he could extract part of his own spiritual energy and infuse it in the great talisman to summon one of the beasts that without hesitation will come to help him defeat the spirit of the fire. However, the Prota knew that the spiritual energy came from the soul, and if he failed to capture to the spirit of the fire and could not repair his soul in time, then he would die and his soul would fade completely. And in that case the person who is summoned will easily be able to escape. Hearing all this, Sudojai asked him if he dared to bet then. However, Suman told him that it was not necessary to, and unexpectedly, did something with the talisman that shocked everyone. This explained that he had implemented the fire seed of the underworld in the talisman, and if he died, automatically fire infernal would be activated, and the talisman would be destroyed. And without the talisman, no one in this world could open the prison, and these beasts will never see the light of day again. But if he did all this, was to come promise one of them to give his all in battle, because somehow if they all lost, would be harmed. It is thus that without wasting any more time the Purtat absorbed the spiritual energy, and at the same time a great ray of light objected on the great tower, full of chains, thus giving the exit to the great demon guardian of the mountain, Lunju the black bear of the underworld, who emanated a chilling aura. And that's how returning to battle, the black bear attacked without resisting the spirit of the fire, who was able to just block off his onslaught. And since this was the first time, in thousands of years, since the black bear was free, could not help but compete fiercely, and he even did some poses to demonstrate how happy I was. But he immediately received a tremendous slap in the face from our star player, who told him to put an end to the spirit of the fire quickly, for his spiritual energy would not last long. This is how, after receiving these sermons, the black bear relentlessly attacked the spirit of the fire, making him not even have time to react. At that instant the spirit of the fire realized that this beast had crossed the borders of the world, and since he could not use all his strength, he decided to retreat. However, before he could escape, the Protholus stopped him mortal atheists with the help of darkness, mentioning that it was too late to think about running away. And that's how it came out. Capture the spirit of fire in a single motion, who shouted for being let go. In that Mr. Tanjin, at the sight of his ancestor completely trapped, began to crawl towards the, mentioning that this was impossible to believe, but in that better understand about the rope that enveloped the body of his ancestor remained, as he recalled that she was the same one who was tied in the pumpkin he had bought. And to confirm his doubts, it was the Pertu who thanked him, mentioning that thanks to the purchase he made, could have acquired the immobilizing appearance of God, was totally free. At these words Mr. Tanjin began to sink into despair, as he knew how to perfectly well that his ancestor no longer belonged to him. And that's how in a matter of seconds, the spirit of fire disappeared completely and turned into a crimson red jewel. And without wasting time, the Perta took it and observed it very closely. Then turned to Mr. Tianjin and asked him how he looked if they made a deal. But before he could answer, they went down quickly by placing its order on Shujin and asking Tianjin how much he was willing to pay to preserve the of the Sang family. After a few moments, and after he got what Shujin wanted, wakes up and asks his father if it was true who had given him all the family's money, Asura who confirms that this is indeed the case, but mentions that money now no longer makes sense. For very soon the apocalypse will come, and money will no longer serve. This news leaves his son totally ill, as he knows very well that now his family is in ruins and can do nothing to change it. But since the father had some under his sleeve, he ordered quickly to their men who sell all properties as soon as possible, and to purchase all the rice and water that it can store. Also requested that they reinforce and to prepare very well the mansion he had on the of the city, because in that place there was a shelter, subway where they would be when the apocalypse began. And finally ordered them to call the elderly Manhwa, so that they can continue to purchase antiques. After saying all this, very furious, began to curse Arplota, and mentioned that if the family son plays his cards very well, then this apocalypse will be a blessing rather than a smile to them. And with great anger promised that he would make them ring, "Wish I had not been born." In the meantime Arplota went to a store very close to the city, where before entering he saw if everything was in order with your banking side, and upon confirming this, he proceeded to enter the store, thinking that if it hadn't been for the rush I was in, he would have stolen more money from the old man of the same family. But leaving aside that, greeted to the manager and mentioned that he wanted to buy a ton of spiritual cleansing pills, which she confirmed her request, but on second thought was very impressed, as it was a very enormous sum. So I thought if I was jokingly reminding him that the spiritual cleansing pills are just a remedy, traditional to eliminate heat and toxins, but as the Pertat was in a hurry, asked if I would sell them to him or have to go somewhere else to buy them, which the girl, upon hearing this, put on a little bit of dense and told him not to worry, because if they could be sold. However, the only drawback was that because it was a large amount of blow, would have to order it, and it could take a couple of days, would be very expensive. In the face of this problem, the Pertat told him I could pay him 20% more if he fulfilled his order, but on the condition that it be delivered to him tomorrow night. All this said, he proceeded to leave the site, and as I walked through the streets, thought he had already exhausted 10 tons of spiritual cleansing pills throughout Jade City, and had also already placed several orders online, which would be more than enough. And if I did all this, it was because I knew very well that this modest medicine would be the most important thing in this apocalypse, something that surely not even people had to imagine in that. He remembered how he had a very bad time in his past life, for I felt in the flesh the sensation of dying, and who was at all times with him was his dear younger sister, who looked after him with all his strength. But because they had no more spiritual cleansing pills, the pain I felt his nanny was unbearable. His sister, with tears in the eyes, regretted not having stored more of these pills, as this medicine could accelerate the appearance of powers and suppress the zombification effectively. But how could he not allow himself to see his brother in that state? Without hesitation ended up running in search of this drug to the nearest pharmacy, and no matter how much the Prita tried to stop her, she was already completely gone. It was where she was trapped by the unfortunate family. Jiaoning, and since then, Tony never showed up again. However, this time would let nothing bad happen to him again, since now its duty as his brother was to protect it from all dangers. And as for the Sant family, mentioned that they only think about accumulating food for the coming of the apocalypse. But what they don't know is that in the first few stages of the apocalypse, the most important for people with powers are the spiritual cleansing pills, and they play knows perfectly well that by controlling the spiritual cleansing pills, can also control an army of people with powers that can follow your orders. After thinking in all this without hesitation, he invoked him to burn his infernal fire, and began to cultivate its power to become much stronger. Once he had already achieved it, and that appeared Sukyojay, congratulating him, since the infernal fire had been refined by the spirit of the fire, and now it had turned into fire from the other red. With this Harperta can now break barriers and destroy illusions, also managed to raise its power to the second phase, and his control over the fire was now more precise. And now the spirit of the fire had turned into a spear, thus being more useful than Sunan had thought. Returning to the infernal prison, Arperta was greeted by the black bear, who did not hesitate for a second in crushing it and welcoming it. Also mentioned that if next time he wished to invoke a beast, that would not hesitate to invoke him, since he had a great time in the real world, and because he had helped the master of the prison to fulfill missions, reduced his nastiness, and improved the prison treatment. But not only he wanted to be summoned but also Sudajay. But the Pertala sent them both to silence. And at that moment the raven took the floor and told them to keep quiet. Silence, because they were just dogs, domesticated guardians with a few benefits, but heading to the Perta warned him for his own sake not to think of invoking him. If he did, he would take the opportunity to escape. However, in the face of these words, Sunan began to laugh, mentioning that its presence would not be necessary in the future, because with the increase of its powers more doors of the prison would be opened and could summoning demons much more powerful than he is. I have made this very clear to the Pertat. Proceeded to withdraw, telling the raven demon that by then, he will most likely come looking for it. After this, while already at home, reading with the talisman in hand, and looking out the window, could not avoid to think that tomorrow will be the penultimate day before the apocalypse, so I was aware that I had to take advantage of to the maximum of your time. And since he still had more than 20 million Jones in his hands, planned to buy an object as well as the following day he was presented at the exhibition of jewelry, and while he observed everything around him, something caught his attention. So he decided to come forward and mention that here was what I was looking for. In the apocalypse, common resources can be plundered, but the power cores needed to race level are only obtained by eliminating zombies. And this stone that had diamond contains a large amount of crystallized energy, enough to race from the second to the third phase. In the previous life of our main character, someone lucky obtained this stone and went ahead of everyone, achieving great advantages. So this time should make sure to get it no matter what it costs. This is how the auction began. Selling a set of jade by 1.3 million. And then the following article was presented, which was the stone we saw a few moments ago. And as soon as this object was launched at auction, quickly all began to bid with very high sums of money. But at that point a blonde guy offered 5 million joins, which left the whole room stunned. Commented that it was something to be expected from the great Yang and mentioned that they were not competition for someone like him. But suddenly it was heard throughout the room. Someone offer 6 million for the stone. Something that left Kiam very surprised, who asked who was the person who dared to challenge him. And immediately a manager approached the Pertat with the passage and mentioning that only club members with a black card bankers could participate. However, they soon closed his mouth by pulling out Sid card and asked if there was now a problem. This demonstration stunned Pekai, but he quickly offered him the pass, thinking that the star player was a young heir to a prestigious family, as these black cards were very difficult to obtain. And since no one had made a better offer, the presenter asked if there was no one else interested in continuing to bid. Sing embargo Yun would not lag behind, and offered 7 million, but the Pertat, neither would he do so, and without hesitation offered 10 million. Something that stunned all the people in the room, since the price had exceeded the value of the stone in its entirety. In that Yum's companion suggested that he no longer offer you, since it was only a stone, and also mentioned that he will surely, that boy was just appearing. At these words the red-haired man spoke to the Pertat, what was its name, who without hesitation replied that his name was Sunan. After having said this, and that guy, I told him I would never forget him. The star was handed over to that stone, and he couldn't help but be already aware that with this his destiny would change completely. That is how he retired to return home. But suddenly in that before I can walk through the door, heard loud screams behind him asking for help. So immediately, turned around to see what was going on, and at to do so, he observed a large creature approaching him, at high speed ready to attack it. The curious thing about all this is that the creature did not look like interested in no one instead, but flew accurately toward the stone. I had just purchased it at auction. Upon witnessing this, the Pertat mentioned that this behavior was particularly strange, and could be explained by an unusual phenomenon, because when the event happened, and the stones were placed close to each other, something in the energy changed, causing the appearance of the corpse. That he was clearly not at all happy with this alteration, and that he was I knew perfectly well that with the appearance of this monster, the whole world was about to bed into disorder. And this being was only the first hint of the horrors that were to come. But suddenly, in that the man who had previously underrated Sunan rose quickly, a fierce cease and ran to the stage to grab something with which he defend yourself. However, he could do nothing against this great beast. And before I could, the creature's reaction brought him down with a single blow, and seeing how the beast approached the Sunan and understood that he had to act quickly. Is thus how with a determination, relentless in a matter of seconds, released its power, and their eyes scorching flames broke out and hit directly against the snake, burning it completely. Upon receiving this tremendous attack, the creature fell to the ground defeated, and then unite their skills to analyze it, discovering that the serpent had no special power, which surprised him a lot with this, since I had expected find some hidden force in the creature, but without a second thought, decided to absorb it into his dimension and get rid of it, once and for all. While all this was happening, Yan, who had previously considered Sunan a rival, was on his knees, completely impressed by what I had just witnessed. And at that moment he expressed that they play was not only a rich man, but also an expert with extraordinary skills, and wished to become his, in the hope of learning to master such power. After this, below the building where the Perta lived, a small group of people, murmuring about what was happening at the time, to see them assumed to buy large quantities of supplies. Some began to speculate, wondering if maybe he was planning open some kind of business, and even considered the idea of a supermarket. But others failed to understand why I was doing all this. It was then that an older woman intervened in the conversation, commenting in a sarcastic tone that those who thought that his nanny would open a business there were daydreaming. She considered the idea to be completely absurd. However, at that precise instant, a young woman approached the woman and asked if she would be willing to paint the place, to open a supermarket there, to which the broad with a gesture of, I thought that place was too bad for a business, and that he would waste his time if he accepted this proposal. But just at that moment, Suman appeared in the background, murmuring for himself about how much he had spent on supplies. And while I'm thinking about it, wondered if he was still missing something else. It was then that the delivery man arrived, and informed him that everything he had requested was already delivered, and asked him to review all that was received before he left, as the following day I had other orders pending. Sin Embargo, with a confident expression, asked him to leave him, that he would be in charge of everything from that moment on. And when the delivery men were about to leave, suddenly the woman heard that the next day, another truck would arrive with more deliveries for the Prota, and upon learning that despite the death of his parents, he had decided to open a supermarket right on site, that she liked so much, the aunt couldn't help but fill herself with fury, and I wasn't going to let it go so easily. So he began to draw up a plan to make our Prota regret his decision. And at that time, the boy who accompanied her told her to go to the bathroom, and headed towards the chest of the Prota, where he began urinating on the packages. The old lady saw what she was doing, asked him with a smile to stay a while longer, but he soon approached Sunan to suggest that you do not pay attention to the child, since in the end he was just a child. However, the Prota, without thinking for a second, him by the neck and put him in front of the woman, which this infuriated her even more that she began to rant against him. But our star didn't care what he thought, since I knew that the next day, they probably wouldn't even be here to criticize him, and so with a gesture of indifference, closed the door in the woman's nose, which was bursting with rage. But I couldn't do much else. Suddenly at that precise moment, the child mentioned that he wanted to play with some, which gave the woman a brilliant idea. And so it is without hesitation, the child's hand and began to run, asking him to follow her, because tonight they would throw a lot of firecrackers. And as I advanced, I guess by any chance a spark of fire fall into a room full of cardboard boxes. It would all be a natural accident, and nothing I could blame her for. Directly in the meantime, inside the glass, our Prota observed that everything was in order, and without hesitation, opened its dimension. In doing so, immediately began to transfer the boxes to the space. And while this was happening on the other side of the portal, Sudoja watched everything that came in. And even though I didn't understand what all this was about, I was grateful for the hens arriving, as it could finally be given a good banquet. But at that point Sunan asked him to keep all those boxes in an empty room, to which I sweated very calmly, explained that she was a storage expert, and that within that dimension could support many animals, and organize all the space so that each animal had its own section. all perfectly divided, and mentioned that if they needed anything, would simply go to the appropriate section. In addition, the energy within the dimension seemed to make the meat of animals was much tastier. That's why the proto wanted to bring a lot of live animals, but only those necessary to ensure that this place could be maintained for decades. Although that was important, Xuyan was not so worried about the food, and what really mattered to him was to cultivate, since in times of darkness, the most crucial thing is the seeds and the soil, and as long as there are these resources, life can go on. Thanks to this advice, our proto decided to change his approach, and instead of continuing to think about food, opted to go to the land to get seeds. That is how he proceeded without hesitation to withdraw, mentioning that he was coming back soon, and when he arrived in the outside world he realized something, as he wondered if the tower of his demonic pressure to handle all the snow that accumulated on the ground. However, he decided to check it out, and quickly put his hand on the earth, and at that instant, all the earth began to be absorbed into its dimension, leaving everything clean and ready for what is to come. Within the dimension, sweated when he noticed how much soil he had absorbed, and quickly asked the proto to stop him, that he had already gathered enough. Explained that he could not continue, for his spiritual power was not enough, and the space he had created was too small to be able to. However, as expected, Xuyan ignored his warnings, and despite having gathered a number of impressive earth, I felt it was not enough. And I understand that at the end of the day, the world is coming to an end, and the land you see now will cease to be useful, and the planet will become chaos, a place where nothing more can be cultivated. And at that time, no doubt about continuing to harvest land, or if he should leave it for a while. But finally, decides to postpone the task, and takes the stone he had acquired at auction, and without hesitation began to cultivate it, as I could not waste any more time. In the house of the woman of yesteryear, she was setting up all the explosives, and while doing so, commented that Sunan will not arrive until midnight. Shortly thereafter, his grandson appears with a toy, and she is happy at the sight of him, and takes the corpse in his hands. Then asks him if by any chance he managed to get the bombs he had ordered from him in a specific store. And when the child was about to respond, suddenly in that he behaved in a strange way, and stated that there was someone inside the glass. Suddenly in that the boy took the mirror and put it on his grandmother's face, and when she looked, saw a monstrous creature reflected in the glass. Upon witnessing this, she fell to the ground in terror, and asked his grandson to drop the, as it could not stand the presence of ghosts. However, the child flatly refused, as I just wanted to show him what he had found. And when he got closer than usual, the creature in the desert became more real, until he gets rid of the mirror, and got inside the woman's body. At that time she fell to the ground, while a strong aura emanated from his body, and the child with a sinister smile, said he thought it was all a lot of fun. But that smile soon disappeared, because when he looked up, saw his grandmother completely transformed. Immediately she in a miraculous way we did it to hug him, to which the somewhat bewildered boy approached. But suddenly darkness caught him and him into his own dimension. And out of the city, the sky was covered with strange silhouettes and floating mirrors. Then of this the next day in a parking lot near a pier, a man was watching a ship approach, in which man approached them saying that they had caught some rare fish. And then several were thrown of those fish to the ground, wondering if they would still be fit to eat. But in the meantime, returning to the dock, that man firm before entered the gym, mentioning that it was about time, and asked his partner named Sam to pass on the inventory. But something in him seemed to have changed, as it begins to show strange behaviors. Seeing this, his partner, restless as it recently seemed to be perfectly fine, but now he was complaining of a severe headache. And at that instant, Captain, what the heck was wrong with him, and if he had caught a cold? But before old man could answer, suddenly in that man arrived to break in the place. Immediately that man, when he saw them, asked who the heck they were. Hello, one of them mentioned that had heard that all hills of spiritual cleansing of the city are in this sanctuary, but the one in charge explained that this merchandise was purchased by a customer and ordered them to retire. Sin embargo, one of the guys gave the order to empty the entire, and no matter how much the manager tried to paint them, I understand absolutely nothing. The only thing we did was to receive a tremendous push that made it crash into his partner. Once they got rid of the manager, The guy gave the order to pick up everything immediately. But as soon as he took a step forward, he was suddenly away by Olgo, who had become a zombie. And he was totally out of control that he was acting by instinct. Sin embargo, those men were not intimidated at all and took defensive postures, and then attacked the zombie, and neutralize it with many blows throughout the body, and that's how they managed to finish him off. But suddenly, in that, the boss in charge began to take the appearance of a zombie, and apparently could not control what was about to come. However, before that happens, gave the order to his men to hasten and take all medicines. But just at that moment our main character appeared, asking if they prefer to rob him, and affirmed that everything that was in this place belonged to him. Then I understand, sarcastically, if they were already anxious to leave this world, as he would have no problem fulfilling his dreams. But in that the boss in charge took the floor and mentioned that this port and the nearby industrial park are properties of your lord. So since this merchandise was located in this area, meant that it also belonged to them. But since they didn't want to be so bad, told the protect to put his price on his retirement in peace. However, his lullaby approached him made it very clear to him, who was not interested in negotiating, and warned everyone that they had 1 minute to leave this place, or else the consequences would be serious. But in that, when you move a little further forward and notice an infected person, wondered if the sonification had already begun. But suddenly, at that time one of the men gave the order to be attacked. And that's how they threw themselves with everything against the prota. However, he dodged the attack very easily. I love men in black very much confused. And at that moment, when they looked up, they realized that they were playing was on top of the pile of boxes. Who without wasting time opened one of them, which contained packaged food, and asked if this also belonged to his boss, since from him, it was just the spiritual cleansing pills. When the guy who was transforming into a zombie heard this, I thought what he intended to do. To which the prota, like an overwhelming look, he told him that he learned to do the same as them, since now the shipment also belonged to him. After this, the next day, in a mansion, screams could be heard inside. It was about last night's guys, who were informing a woman that an unknown guy had recovered the spiritual cleansing pills, and took all the remaining merchandise. In addition, was told that the person had supernatural powers, and that he was a real hero, as they had finished them off very easily, and had closed the door with a power images so they could not enter. But once they managed to enter, were very confused, as there was no trace of any object in the corpse. Hearing all this, the woman immediately asked what was the name of that person. To which one of the most furious men commented that it had reviewed the recipient's information, and discovered that the person who had ordered the spiritual cleansing pill, his name was Sunan. Upon hearing this name, the woman became very thoughtful, and wondered if the main character was also a being with powers and that it appears also had some storage ability. And when I was about to, for completing one of his thoughts, was suddenly interrupted, when one of the men began to wobbled and suddenly fell to the ground, gradually transforming into a zombie. In that it is Olinda, at the sight of his bodyguard turned into a zombie, understands that the poison has already reached his brain, and that if you try to give him a medicinal pill, it is too late. For what it orders to another of his men to take charge of his partner's body and burn it outside the house. Also warns him not to leave to catch it. Do not enter in contact with its body fluids as they could also infect it. But while the guard assimilates all this, the zombie returns to gain strength to get up and launch himself against Shaolin. But she, making use of her spiritual powers, easily submits it, using the branches of a tree to execute it on the spot, then lets the body move among the plants in his garden. Still the guard who doesn't know what to think. But his boss warns him that this is just the beginning. To follow, looking for medicines and armaments for supplies during the apocalypse, giving him permission to use all the resources of his family in order to achieve this. Guards be mentally prepared for what is to come. Then when he sees out the window, understands that the end of the world has come, and the heroes are coming. We stopped by to see the protagonist and his sister. This warns him that, from now on, outside air and water are not safe, and should not come into contact with your skin, so that should consume only bottled water, and if they felt bad, make use of medicinal pills. But above all, if something happens to you, she must tell him, to his brother, immediately, to which the girl accepts without hesitation the protect. But in that the star sister asks him what he is really going on. because he wants to know the truth at once. Hearing this, Anin understands that she can no longer hide the truth from him, so he decides to take her for a walk in the building, to show you everything. When she leaves, she notices that it has still been a long time since the last time he was abroad. Cannot feel that the atmosphere has a gloomy feeling. But the prota makes it clear that this is because the ghosts are finally showing themselves. Then we see the woman who previously wanted ruin things for Sunan, who, even though she is possessed by the ghost of paradise, which makes her hate others for keeping things that she wants and thinks he deserves. The woman goes crazy, feeling that someone is nearby, who keeps bothering her, and gets angry, because at night he does not let her sleep. So full of hate, runs away to meet that person and eliminate it at once. Not far from the area, Roland and his mother are out for a walk, but she is playing, because neighborhood security doesn't look very good. But Roland believes that with someone as strong as they sound, there should be no problems, believing that it will soon be his home in the future. Mother praises her for having convinced her to give him so much money for your surgeries abroad. But it is still somewhat hidden, because the prota does not seem to someone for his daughter Roland. However, he makes it clear to his mother that his is more than worthy of dating her, because he has always been her. While he does not understand why he is so rude now, knows that with a little effort, and its charms, will come back crawling to be her boyfriend again. And since she now knows how strong she has become, cannot afford to let him go. Roland just needs to make the prota fall surrendered to its beauty, and so you can have what you want in the world. He has also learned how he only stole from her, to one of the most powerful and prestigious family of the entire city. She thought that just by showing herself to the main character, would be more than enough to convince him to become a couple again. But at that time, see him leaving in a cab with another woman, and cannot afford to lose it. Now that they know how much it really is worth. Moments later, we see Sunan and his sister arriving at the zoo, where a parent complains to one of the caregivers about how aggressive the animals have become. The prota's sister on his side knows that this is due to the beginning of the apocalypse, for his brother had told him everything along the way. She knew thanks to her brother that soon people would become zombies, or they would gain superpowers to fight the reinforcements that would arrive. But somehow, he woke up first than the others, and now you can see the future, so they are better prepared. However, his nano omitted the part in which they were both betrayed by their friends, since that would make her too sad. To turn that aside, she asks him why they went to the zoo instead of a place to hide in. To what they say, he explains that even though they can hide, that is not a good option, as sooner or later they will have to fight, and despite the great abilities of the prota, he can't protect his sister all the time. So he has brought it so that he can acquire their own powers. Also excited about this, his sister asks him if he really can become as strong as he is, to take care of her back, showing how he feels about a great love for his older brother. That's how they both begin their mission at the zoo. But without realizing it, Roland and his mother follow him from outside, both intrigued because Anna wanted to enter the zoo together with his sister. But his mother asks him to hurry up so that they do not lose sight of their mine gold and try to create an opportunity to make him fall before his charms. Roland then takes advantage of this moment to place the for a better impression with Sunan, but not realizes that behind you, a lot of alpacas are looking at it in a threatening way, ready to attack at any time. On the other hand, Nami, his sister, have arrived to the area where they are located turtles, and him that Sudoche warns him that, even since the dimension of the underworld may smell unusual, hides in the zoo. The black bear of the underworld also notices that something strange is found in the surrounding area. Loki makes him nervous, since it usually that guy of beasts are the who are stronger and can live even longer than him. Sunan continues to move forward together with his sister and end up meeting with a clear in which there is already a turtle resting on a rock. Immediately both Sudaja, like the black bear, will recognize as an old friend who has lived more than 1,000 years. In turn, the prota confirms this, remembering how his turtle lived in the zoo since before it was built, more than 100 years ago. To see better, El Cartel in front of her, the prota understands that no one really knows the age of the turtle. What you do know, Ithka was famous even in his past life, because at that time an evil god tried to pass through the area where she was, but could not do so, and to chase him away the turtle confronted him, but as much as the god tried to hit her, its shell did not break or break. As soon as he heard and remembered this fact, could not think of a better way to protect his sister. and understood that the first thing he should do was to ask the turtle for a favor. That is why he approaches the animal to talk to it. But he does not react when he calls her. So they ring. Decides to intimidate her by expressing that she wants turtle soup, which does wake her up. The turtle sighs at the sight that humans are always so fragile, and since the prota has gone with a petition for her, makes it even more rude. For not saying that he just threatened her to get her attention. But the prota warns him that the apocalypse is approaching, and has no time for formalities. Then introduces himself and his sister, who is very surprised, because the turtle can really speak. The old turtle responds that he only stayed at the zoo because her caregiver fed her and treated her very well during all this time. But some things that are said about her are just an accident, such as a matter related to the name Nyanan. The turtle takes some time in that to see the world around him and understand that this has changed a lot in just 1 century, but compared to its more than 3,000 years of life, it's just a flicker on your part. South Africa and the bear of the underworld are thrilled to hear how old the turtle is, since if they eat it, could increase their life expectancy by hundreds of years. But leaving aside that his friends are almost crazy about a turtle, Suman asks him to protect his sister, offering to fulfill any condition that proposes to it. Hearing this, the turtle looks up at the sky to see the disturbing red moon, feeling the danger ahead for the world. Understanding that when it all begins, your turtle clan will probably suffer. Dame proposes that if he is concerned about baby turtles, then he can take them to his prison in hell, in order to create them, without any problem, until they are adults. The great turtle, hearing about the prison of hell, is startled to remember the place where the black turtle ascended. So finally, understands why he has awakened after 100 years. Willing to test, Sunan offers to follow him if he can survive, with its powers and strength, its weight of more than 3,000 years of life. Warning us that, though I can control the prison of hell, the apocalypse will only become more and more dangerous as time goes on. Is how the turtle drops on its Nankoi in the subject, but it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to lift it, scaring his sister, who can only try to cheer him on. On the other hand, Roland and his mother hear the roar, not far from where they are. But then one of the alpacas nearby rips off his wig with one bite, pissing off Roland, who is trying to recover it. But unfortunately for her, the alpaca spits in his face as a sign of denial. And not only that, but all the surrounding alpacas begin to spit. Both her and her mother, crossing them out a lot and infuriating them even more. Roland, who swears to put an end to them. But his mother calms her down by reminding him that the most important thing is to find the protagonist. With the wig barely in conditions, Roland continues on his way with his mother, realizing that it is the wrong one. Sin Embargo see that there is a lot of movement in the turtle area, so they come to the conclusion that the protagonist must be there, but what they did not expect was for me to be so deep in the forest. That also sucks, because of the lakes where animals spend their time. Roland's mother unintentionally ends stepping on a turtle's eggs and staining his shoes. Even more disgusted and upset, uses the body of a turtle to clean yourself and do something useful with it, without noticing that they have made her very angry, as they delve even deeper into the forest. In that, Roland feels how something is moving through the bushes, and sees this as the perfect opportunity to make a scene where it appears lost, and also, so that the prota catches it, so they can be together again like in a fairy tale. But when they stop at the bushes, is only found with a turtle giant who wastes no time and bites her arm. An amusing fact about turtles is that their teeth are usually small but sharp. Not to mention that their jaws are so strong that once you are bitten it is almost impossible to break free. In addition to the fact that it is extremely painful. Roland discovers this in a bad way when bitten by the turtle. But not may occur yet. If it does, Shuin will find out and see her into ugly a situation. So it is contained for its sake. But his mother does not have the same willpower when they bite her as well. A group of turtles corner them and begin to bite them mercilessly, making them tremble with fear. Controls shouting for the prota to come and save her. But unfortunately, in the middle of their struggle against the turtles, stumbles and falls into the water that makes it smell very bad. Back with Sunan. This one continues to fight against the ancient tortoise, receiving a message of the bear black to let him out and beat the turtle himself, promising to share the meat. But Sunan wants to do this on his own. The prota does everything as much as possible for his spiritual energy and lifting the turtle. But she just makes fun of how Sunan is making an effort to only stay alive. asks him to seize the title of head of the infernal prison, promising that if it does, will take care of their family and keep them safe, stating that he is not and never will be strong enough to raise it up or survive the apocalypse. The furioso, and wanting to protect his sister, decides to take as much energy as he can from the tower and the spirits in it, getting even stronger to tell the turtle millenary on an old saying. If you do not advance, you withdraw, and with that idea he manages to raise it in the air, and then threw it away. Surprised by this, the turtle millenary can do nothing but try to flee. But the prota pulls up the thread to tie Gunzu bought, and thus catch it. The friends of the prota are very angry about the turtle's words about her should be the one to rule the prison of hell, and asks Yunan to kill her for being so. To which the latter raises his sword and orders him to submit to the tying it by the neck with the thread. But the turtle continues to resist capture, categorically refusing to do so. However, they ring, convinced that the turtle will only learn the bad way, blows him to the head with his sword. What makes her angry? Because he is also being too hard on her. When he has come to ask you for a favor, and in view of the fact that he cannot escape, tries to ask his sister to stop him. But for Sunan it is also a surprise to be so strong, as I did not expect last time's improvement, increase both the margin of his physical strength and power, spiritual. But before we can continue to punish the millenary turtle, his sister appears to ask her brother to stop and let her go, because it seems extremely at that to see that the main character's sister is such a good girl, capable even of touching it in spite of the infernal fire, decides to stop fighting, and agrees to protect her from all danger. But he also asks her to stop calling the turtle millenary, and that in its place, only Newton dams, becoming a miniature version of itself. As a kind of paradise, the turtle admires the girl's ability to recognize malice, which is good potential for a human. So he promises him that in the future with his powers, he won't have to be afraid of anything during the end of the world. What makes the star's sister very happy, who also becomes very friendly with the little turtle. However, seeing this discourages the black bear quite a bit, because that means he will no longer be able to get stronger with turtle soup. But unfortunately, even with this new look form, the prota remains dissatisfied, because he does not want to leave his sister in the care of a being that they still do not fully control. So you need some kind of insurance. Newton understands perfectly well what he is referring to, but now he understands that he is someone worthy of being the owner of the infernal prison. So without hesitation, enters the talisman to become and be under the complete control of the prison. Play this last. Warns him that if he does not comply with the duty to care for his little sister, then he will put you through a severe punishment without mercy, to which Newton understands perfectly. Done this, they finally succeeded in ensuring their sister's well-being. But now what follows is something else. However, unfortunately they cannot focus on it, because at that time an animal stampede crosses the area. Sumian knows that this is not very normal, but takes the opportunity to take some of them to take them to the infernal prison dimension. Among them the Newton Tortoise clan, to keep him happy. Then takes his sister down the trees to a safe place. And on the way they meet Roland, which has lost all its beauty after the turtle attack, but still makes an attempt to attract the prota's attention. He asks him what he is doing there, and she replies that she had been looking for him, because he always knew that he liked her very much. And now, who knows how strong he is, wants them to be boyfriend and girlfriend again. She is a very beautiful woman, but for what it looks like now, does not seem to have a good chance of returning to the prota. So much Roland, like his mother, start to go crazy, and they try all the tricks and deception who have in order to convince the prota to go out with her again. But instead they seem to be more delirious. The prota, to see the mother and daughter in such a deplorable state, only leaves before the germs infect him. I found Roland in the middle of the swamp crying and bereaved, because apparently the boy who was previously very much in love with her, now you don't find her as pretty as before. He can't believe she is being treated in this bad way. But as she screams in anger to the prota, attracts unwanted attention from surrounding reflections, evil wolves, who are anxious to eat her and her mother. Frightened Roland tries to chase them away, warning them that she is the most beautiful woman in the world, and that all men will fall surrendered to their charms, so she will become a queen. But wild wolves don't care about this. As she screams they pounce on her to devour her. On the other hand, Suian is touring the zoo, while carrying his sister as if she were a sack of potatoes. realizing the vast majority of the animals have already been taken by other people, or they are simply gone, so it is best to look for a place to rest. While they keep looking for something, find the zoo's management office, where no one is supposed to be there, because the zoo is located near the suburbs, and that it has mountains on one side. The prota understands that there will be no danger of intruders, not to mention that whoever works here is surely calm. So it is the perfect place to leave your sister, for a while, at least until you find a better place. When he enters with his sister, both prove that surveillance is very good, and that there are bedrooms and supplies to spare for both of them. So that, combined with the fact that he is playing in the middle of the forest, could be the perfect place to stay for a while. But for all they have let, his sister, at the sight of the place, also thinks it's perfect for them both to stay for a while, and it is best to simply use it as a shelter. She knows that he still has on business abroad, and that is why he asks you to leave and carry them out, promising that she can take care of herself while waiting for you. In here, Sunan is afraid to leave his sister alone, and asks him if it will really be okay if he leaves. But she replies with a smile that she will not be alone, but the great millenary tortoise will protect it. After all, they are now alone at the end of the world, and she needs to become stronger for the sake of both of us. That's why he asked the turtle millenary to teach him how to cultivate combat skills, and promises to make every effort to be able to help his Nana in the future, and do not have to depend on him, but that he can depend on her when you really need it. This makes the prota very proud to see that she has such a reliable younger sister, but before leaving, warns the turtle millenary to ensure that it is kept safe. But the 1,000-year-old tortoise promises that nothing will happen while he is with his sister, and to prove it, it activates its defensive ability, which creates a gigantic shell of light around the building, with which wild animals cannot pass. The building is already very difficult to access because of this turns the residents into an impenetrable fortress, which not even the most dangerous can enter. So neither the prota nor his sister have something to worry about in the near future. This alleviates Sunan's fears, at least for now, and with nothing more to do, he flies out of a window, being fired by his sister, who promises to wait for him as long as he needs to, willing to become stronger. In the time the past was, Sunan rushes through the streets like a superhero, looking for things that are useful to you, but in the middle of his journey, realizes how the world has begun to change. Everything quickly begins to be destroyed in a chaotic manner, and the sky turns dark with a red moon, indicating that the end of the world is near. The prota knows that his time is running out, and that's why it needs to be faster. But as he speeds the pace, chaos takes over the streets, in the form of zombies that eat each other, everything in their path. As all this occurs, news from around the world begin to transmit on how the whole catastrophe is happening. It to all viewers, and warning of a dangerous new disease, not to mention a big storm looming, among many other things. So people are advised to take refuge in their homes, and to keep sufficient resources such as water and food to survive the coming. In one of these houses, the teacher of the prota's sister has just woken up, confused by what she sees on TV, thinking that they are treating all this as if it were the end of the world. But when you see the news on your phone, realizes it is true. Seriously, there are zombies eating people in the streets, and even comes to see how calm a mysterious and terrifying figure peeks out of the red moon, looking at everything as if I were about to cause a massacre even worse than all those being carried out. The woman then is beginning to feel very dizzy, and with a little fever, so that ends up collapsing a few seconds later to have woken up again lying on the sofa. She also notes that the tips of its fingers have begun to turn from a sickly purple hue, but does not realize that it is the zombie disease. Zeno thinks it's just a cold she caught for being neglected, and thinks that if you take a medicine then you will be better off in a short time. However, at that time, remembers of the words of the prota about by special medicine before all this began. She for some reason ended up listening to him, and now that he sees it is so bad, decides to take one of the pills he advised her to take. But that disease is so strong that it can barely move freely. And just when he manages to put one of the medicines in his mouth, on her sofa once again, Sunan is on one of the city. looking at the landscape of the end of the world and timing. With precision, time that is left before everything gets uglier than it already is. It is 5 o'clock. So it only has a little more than an hour left before it's all over. In his past life, a huge deity descended on the Emerald City at midnight. But before that, a group of smaller deities begin to appear at 6 o'clock, implying what will happen shortly if he does not hurry enough to finish his plans. Because if he does not do it in time, everything will end the same way as last time. To have a better chance of success. Recalls his previous life, knowing that the first deity who appeared was found in a construction site of the emperor's palace, and that at the time of relegation caused massive destruction that not only killed the building, but with everything around it, causing people to genuinely panic. For the first time at the beginning of the apocalypse, Suman knows he needs to become stronger, and for that he needs to obtain an enormous amount of soul power. And the best way to achieve that is hunting for the deity who hopes to arrive soon. To have an even better chance of winning, sits on the roof of the building, and sets about meditating to gather soul power, so that his fiery ability reaches level 3 in an instant. And not only that, but the red lotus of fire has developed a mutation. So it is the ideal time to try it out, see if it works in combat. By checking your status sheet, realizes that the new ability of his lotus of fire allows you to destroy hearts, and that even its resistance to high temperatures has increased greatly, which now makes it immensely powerful. In the apocalypse, Sumian realizes that by melting the ability of the millenary tortoise mineral, made his skill reach level 3. Verifying that to have recruited it was much more beneficial than he initially thought. And that is why he feels very grateful. But before you do anything, needs to test it. With the deity approaching the earth, preparing his fist with the sacred fire of his soul to start the combat at any time. While he was preparing his fatal blow, a handful of men appear near him, warning him that this is the emperor's sacred palace, and that no one may enter without proper authorization, not even high-ranking people in the city. As the men begin to run towards him to throw him out, one of them asks the boss how he got in, as the stairs and elevators are sealed. But his boss doesn't care, and believes he is making excuses for his incompetence, as everyone has done lately, by telling them about the fact that people have fallen ill with a mysterious virus, who does not believe it to be true, but an invention of slackers. So he gives him a punch to shut up and instead go after the prota, while affirming for himself that low-ranking people like him is only suitable for this type of work as extras, and do only what they are told, as if they were pocket soldiers, in what they talk about and lash out at Sunan. The latter looks to the sky and realizes that catastrophe is coming, or more precisely, that the demonic deity is beginning to come down from the heavens to begin the true end of the world, and before any of the men can touch it, everyone is paralyzed with fear at the sight that in heaven, a crack begins to form. The boss rubs his eyes in the belief that he is seeing things, but for his grandmother and everyone else's grandmother are seeing exactly what is happening. And in the midst of all the chaos, the crack is opened by an oily claw, accompanied by a nightmare being roaring furiously, and then exit the portal ready to cause chaos. And we see that their appearance is similar to the mix between a minotaur and a giant spider. As soon as it falls to earth, everything becomes total chaos, and one of the men of yesteryear is frightened when he sees that a real demon just arrived on earth, but does not have time to flee, because it appears the beast has become aware of his presence, thanks to its cry of fear. The leader of the thugs rush to call for help from their men, ordering them to protect you in a state of total fear, promising them that if they do it will give them a raise. At that time, is horrified to see the boy so close to him. And this one without hesitation, places his weapon heavily over the poor man's body, cutting it in half as if it were a piece of paper, in front of the frightened gaze of all his men. Panicking prisoners begin to run for their lives, in a desperate attempt to save themselves, leaving behind everything that brought them together in their normal lives, before the apocalypse. The demonic deity, on the other hand, begins to chase them as he mocks their cowardice. And how can you crush them as if they were simple insects ready to have fun in this new world, where the rules no longer exist, and can do whatever he wants with humans, that for him are but mere ants in his path. The only one who is not afraid or impressed by its appearance is the main character, who remains impassive in the face of the demonic deity. The latter tries to crush him like everyone else. But when he tries, he realizes that he can't do it. Because they ring increases your soul power for the last second, thus obtaining a strength out of the ordinary in order to be able to hold the deity in its place, comparing it to an insect as well. As he does not feel that he is using strength at all, the Prota thinks it's the perfect opportunity to test their new powers, and invokes his sword of fire, while the demonic deity, he sees him confused because he can understand what he is saying, which a normal human could not, because the apocalypse has just begun. Before the deity can understand who or what is the Prota, the latter takes momentum, and using their spiritual skills, jumps in the air, reaching for the creature, to cut it to pieces with his flaming sword. In a matter of seconds, the demonic deity is reduced to little more than a body, lifeless, and as it falls, the Prota lands gracefully on the ground, attracting the attention of all those around them, by giving them a glimpse of hope that there is someone that actually can face monsters like this. On the other hand, the deity rises, since it seems, did not suffer so much from Sunan's attack, as to fall before him. It's that easy. The deity admits that he hoped to seize power. On Earth it would be boring, like just going around crushing a few insects. But now that he has found the protagonist, believes that his work here can be much more interesting, and even feels grateful to him. Because now they can play the fight, without crossing at all. So it promises that you will enjoy it very much. Dean of the Prota's short life a hell. Once I am done with him, and asks him to be that he is a stronger insect. He low normal, but not enough to live up to it. And with a quick movement attacks Sunan fiercely, which narrow is the blow. The latter smiles, scaring the demonic deity, and then take another leap towards it. Sunan thinks he also took the loss of a leg, that he surely won't mind if he gets another one. After all, it has many of them, like a spider or a centipede. But this was just a mockery, for its real objective is the hand of the deity. The latter responds, approaching its jaws to bite and eat it. But in that little instant, the Prota manages to dodge the attack, and in this way, descend upon his enemy with his sword high. The demonic deity tries to stop him by using his disappointing look. But thanks to the new level of his ability, the Prota is now much more resistant to high temperatures. So this doesn't even tickle him practically. So without problems, descends until he has his enemy within reach of his sword, managing to cut off his arm with great ease. This leaves everyone present impressed. But more the devil, because I did not expect a mere human being could cause him so much harm, and demands to know what made him to bring him to this horrible state, and cause him such a severe injury. The main character, at the sight of him so upset and full of courage, warns him that it is better not to move, because after all, still has 5 more legs, and 1 hand left, and if it makes an abrupt movement, could lose them all in an instant. Just like it just happened to him. In the midst of all this, Sunan takes the opportunity to release to the maximum the power of his soul flames, becoming involved in them, and their power, ready to prove who is the strongest. While the power of his flames on his hand, to form the sword again, warns him, the devil, to be very careful about what he does, and also that he is not allowed to leave this world, in no way, until he has finished testing his new skills on it, and has been completely isolated. The demonic entity cannot understand what is happening, since he had been waiting for this opportunity to dominate the world for a long time. But now that he has it, cannot even afford to end the lives of some people, simple insects, all because of a single human, which is much stronger than any of their kind would have expected. Before coming here, while the Prota cuts limb from limb, the devil can only cursed him and wondered how he became so strong. If humans are not supposed to, would know of the arrival of demons, until it was too late to avoid them. The Prota is somewhat disappointed, since the demon that was found was much weaker than he initially thought. But remember that after all, this is just the beginning, and as such many more will come like this, and they will surely be worse than him, so you must be prepared one way or another. The intense battle is over. The Prota is dropped on the floor to rest a little, after the immense effort made to humiliate the hero with his new powers, knowing that the beasts and divine entities that follow this will be much stronger, and over time each one will be more dangerous than the previous one. Being ready to put an end to all this, the Prota approaches the body of the beast to offer to give him his soul power of his own free will, or continue to suffer humiliation in the midst of battle, and in the face of a group of humans that until recently were afraid of him, as if he were the devil himself. The demonic deity does not want to accept defeat, stating that a scholar like him may be sent to the other side, but never humiliated. So swear to keep fighting to the end, even if it leads to their imminent defeat. But before I can continue, saving what little pride he has left, the Portalis takes them both to the infernal tower, where the devil can only see, terrified by the fate that awaits him, without being able to do anything to prevent it, no matter how powerful it may be. In the of an eye, your whole body, or what is left of this, is illuminated and absorbed by the power of the tower, which ends up leading him to the prison of spirits. The Prota, as he is finally alone, and with a moment's peace to relax, sighs at the sight of how hard that demon was, for even after he completely humiliated because of his incredible power, did not accept defeat for a moment. But as soon as he saw the tower that imprisons the spirits, all his courage vanished along with him. But this aside, starts to review the state of his soul power, noting that thanks to his new prisoner, has increased by 5%, which is not bad at all, considering that he has not been lucky enough to find too many powerful creatures, apart from those I already had. The time is then set, and notices that it is after 7 o'clock, which means that he lost more time of the one you did during the battle, and now he cannot afford to rest any longer in one place, as there are still many landing points near the area. However, before leaving, the men of yesteryear who tried to attack him are approached, expressing their sadness because he has just saved them, and they also apologize for having offended him earlier in his attempt to attack him all, at the same time aware that together with him would have a chance to survive. Try to ask where, heads out to follow him and keep him safe. But the Prota makes it clear to them that the apocalypse has just begun, and the only rule that remains is that of each individual on his or her own. This scares men, because that means it won't help them. So they try to approach him to beg him to take them with him, but they ring without an iota of remorse, jumps from the straight to the ground. Men cannot believe how it is that their savior just left them, as if nothing had happened, but one of them takes the Minotaur's gun, believing that they can still sell it for a good sum, and claim the rewards that the Prota did not take. But as he laughs at his idea, his body begins to change, and he laughs strangely. Others think he went crazy, so they try to get away. But then the man begins to undergo a frightening transformation, instantly becoming a zombie that without hesitation attacks those who a moment ago were his friends. They try to confront him and stop him, but it is too late. On the other hand, in the family home error, the boy is called by one of his servants. That warns him that someone among them has developed fever, which is the first symptom of the zombie virus. The leader of the family wants to be sent to the isolation room, but they can't do it, because this time it was his son who contracted the virus, who was begging for help to his father. Eugen screams with pain and suffering as the disease progresses and rots your body. Quickly, he orders his servants to bring him immediately medicine to cure yourself of this disease. But there is nothing they can do to prevent him from becoming a zombie over time, which Yuji does not know, and begins to lose his mind in fear and anger. The servant who called his father tells the latter that although he was given 2 recovery pills for another affected person, fever only slightly reduced, but it still continues, severely affected and in the process of being transformed. The father of Eugen complains about his servant's incompetence, so it orders you to be useful at once and for all, and bring it before him right now, after the recovery pills are brought to you. Eugen's father approaches the window outside the isolation room and throws the pills at his son, ordering him to eat them as soon as possible. With the last of his strength left, Eugen crawls on the floor until his father's gift, taking a lot of the pills in his mouth. While this happens, his father cannot avoid severe concern for your child's welfare and his entire family. But there is nothing I can do more than giving him the few medicines he has, and hope that they will be enough for him to recover. As soon as the tension passes, and Eugen takes the pills all at once, begins to feel much better, lighter and almost cured. Apparently taking so many pills at the same time worked to keep the disease at bay. at least for the time being. His father, seeing this, orders his servants to go to the city and get more sinin pills, which are the ones he has just given, because if they have a good number of them, may be able to completely cure their child. The servant next to him wants to go and do it, but there is a very serious problem with respect to the subject, and they have not been able to find more than these. And now that they have been given to Eugen, they only have 3 boxes of pills left. This infuriates Eugen's father, who yells at the servant about, because they have so few medicines in storage. Since he asked them for a long time to all to be supplied with them, until its warehouses were full. The servant in response is justified by the fact that they only had lists these pills, because unlike those he asked for, these are much cheaper and easier to obtain. The reflection of the family, son orders his servant to go and look for more, or that if necessary, take the firearms you have to steal them. But the servant again gives him a negative answer, counting on the fact that all the recovery pills in the city were purchased by Asuna. As soon as Eugen's father hears this, realizes that the same man who stole so much money from them also hurt them in this, since he knew in advance what would happen. And that's why he took away so many important pills from them. The servant asks him, desperate, what they should do now. Because no matter how they turn out, will encounter manis and dangerous things, which they cannot face, because they do not have the necessary resources. Eugen's father begins to lose patience by leaps and bounds, feeling more and more stressed, because everything is going absolutely wrong. At that time, the door to the isolation room flies away, and behind it appears Eugen with a macabre smile and aura. He expresses feeling better than ever, and demonstrates this by destroying everything in front of it, teaching a new power beyond imagination. His father can't believe it, and Eugen claims that he has already been cured, and in addition to that has developed supernatural abilities that make him a Superman, by verifying that using the pills after getting sick gives you superpowers. Eugen's father orders them to use the 3 boxes of medicine they have left to create more Supermen, so that as soon as they have a new attack force, and demonstrate before the whole city who are in charge. Because if they manage to control the powers that be, supernatural people, then you will have nothing to fear during the apocalypse. On the other hand, the teacher of the protest sister, Falgo, just woke up, feeling better until a neighbor named Without arrives and knocks on the door, asking for help, because there is a horde of zombies outside his house. The teacher tries to open the door, but cannot do so due to fear and confusion, which is why, as time goes by, zombies slowly begin to climb the stairs, until they finally reach the floor where the girls are. But before their neighbor is caught, the teacher manages to open the door, but in turn, manage to see how the girl has a great wound in his back. When it goes and realizes that her friend is zombie injury, understands that she was deceived and recoils in terror, without recognizing that she was injured by zombies. But he is not afraid of anything happening to him because he read a very interesting news item on the internet. According to the article, if you take the sanguine pill before converting, then it will be completely cured. This is the only reason she came to see her friend by, because he knows that his family must have 1 or 2 pills hidden in your home. So now he wants me to give them to him by force. Goes back and forth and ends up being cornered against the wall, while Without continues to pressure her to give him the pills. But in that a horde of zombies tries to force the door open, extending his blue hands to hold one of the 2. Without realizing that they do not have much time left, and in view of the fact that Bai is not going to say anything to him just in case, decides to use it to buy him some time, pushing her out of her house, to feed it to outside zombies. Is panicking, asks her friend why she is doing something like this, and hits desperately open the door for him to open again, before it is too late, while she begs her friend to let her in, without beginning to reveal his true self to her, revealing to her that he always hated her. It turns out that during all this time, I had been supporting her emotionally and financially, but at no time did he see her as his friend, but as someone much better than her, in all possible aspects. Because of all this, without resisting an intense hatred towards her supposed friend, during all these years, until eventually he could no longer, and saw that this would be the moment, perfect to take revenge on her. Go try to reason with her, reminding him that during all this time, she did not see her as a poor girl, but as a friend who needed help, and was always there for her. However, if you do not see it in the same way, and now she just wants to be eaten by zombies. Because I was only taking advantage of it, and its goodwill. As they spoke, the zombies got closer and closer to Bai, until they came to it, and ended up devouring her, while in mockery. She thinks that this kind of ending hits her supposed friend. But just wait for when it's all over. Some remains of it. To stomp on him for fun when he leaves. While laughing, did not notice that he was running out of time, or two. Because the wound on his back begins to rot, showing the first signs of zombie conversion, so that now it can no longer afford to of acting as evil, and instead rushes to get the medicine cabinet, hoping to be lucky enough of finding a bleeding pill, possible to save himself from being a hideous monster, by rummaging around the apartment. Finds a box of pills that illuminates his face with joy. Or so I expected. Because as soon as he opens it, discovers that it is completely empty, and concludes that Bai came first than her, and ate them all, without reading that in the container it says that Bai bought a lot of pills, and that therefore there must be more hidden around the apartment. Desperate, she frantically searches everywhere, as the disease in your body progresses rapidly. However, no matter how hard I try, the house is completely empty of pills. And when it stops for a moment, realizes that his fingers are purple, which means you don't have much time left. At that point your phone rings, and when he listens he discovers it's a by video call, which seems to have survived the zombie attack. Then, goes and shows him a whole bag full of pills, healers that he seeks so much, what fills with despair, so because her friend always had them with her. As soon as she sees them dancing, offers some, which causes, without leaving aside his pride, to bow before her, and ask him on his knees to give him a gift, some pills to recover from, stating that everything he said before was nothing more than a mistake, and as such could not think clearly. Continues to appeal to all the good times they had together. But inside she's just pretending. For he knows you are worth someone with a heart too good for his own good. And therefore if you beg him enough, will not be able to stand idly by while watching her become a zombie. What he did not calculate is that buying might be nice, but not silly. Therefore, she's not going to let them cheat on her again just like that. This immediately collapses all hopes of, without being dislodged, return a match. But as its transformation progresses, by taking the trouble to scold her, in the few remaining moments of humanity, mentioning that he always thought it was just a young woman, dizzy and immature, and now that he has seen his real face, full of hatred and wickedness towards someone who was always there to support her, decides that he will no longer help her, leaving her to her fate with the virus that runs through her veins, by trying to manage to hide in a place away from zombies. So he can now take advantage of, to have their little moment of revenge with his exam, telling him that during times like this, in which society collapses completely, people like without start to show their true face. The latter it is in its last moments of life, begging his girlfriend to give you some pills for the old days, promising me I was wrong by treating her so badly, but Bai has had enough. And even though it hurts his soul to leave the one he considered his companion for so long, is neither a saint nor a fool, so decide that this has been all, wishing him well without going to hell, to repent for his bad deeds, with no more hope, without starting to on the ground, becoming less and less as their illness worsens. But there is nothing I can do to stop it, because one way or another the evils are already done, and his luck is over. In a matter of minutes, she finally loses to zombie disease, and becomes one of them with a horrifying roar that goes through the whole building, for its part goes, and he still can't believe what he just did to his girlfriend, but does not have time enough to lament what he has done. Because at that moment a zombie appears by her side to devour her. This fills her with fear, because she didn't expect it to happen. But as soon as the mirror approaches it and is just a few centimeters away from holding it, his body begins to be covered with a phosphorescent blue veil, with which he manages to escape from the castle without it being. It turns out that before, when he, without pushing her out of her house, thought it would have been everything to her, because the horde of zombies, I was just a few steps away from eating her alive, but Yahello, and allowed her to live a little longer to save herself. This was nothing more and nothing less than the ability he unlocked thanks to the consumption of the 9 pills. At that time she thought it was the end. But then the bluish light covered his entire body. She saw her transparent body with much confusion, without really knowing what was going on. But when he turned to look at the group of zombies, discovered that none of them were able to see her. So he took advantage of this gift from the gods to flee among themselves, confirming that as long as his body was transparent, none of them could see her. Not to mention that he felt a great deal of spiritual energy flowing through your body. Even with all this power and advantage, knows that he cannot stay much longer in the building. So it runs out to the outside. Even with their powers activated, but does not know yet, dominate them because they have just been awakened. So as a result, after running a few meters away, its invisibility disappears completely, leaving it exposed under a tree. Looking so vulnerable, he has no idea what to do. But then he overhears some of his friends calling her. These assure you that they are not infected, and invite her to go with them to get all to safety. They also show that in the news from the group of neighbors, it was announced that a large group of zombies is attacking the building, and that is why many of them have ended up seeking refuge in their homes. Those who are here now tried to contact the police, but this one did not answer them, and they can only fear the worst. One of them begins to spill, ended up thinking that he will not be able to overcome it, for his mother and father have surely already succumbed to the zombie disease, and because of this you will not be able to see them again. However, he is not the only one with problems here. Pregnant woman worries about what to do now. Because if your baby decides to be born at that time, then it will be a problem, even greater for all. But the one most affected is Bai. Because when seeing these people, concludes its fears that the entire city has fallen of zombie disease, wow. She tries to assimilate the horrible situation in which they find themselves, if noticed, that near one of the entrances where they are, there are walkers who try to devour them from the other side. And try, notify your neighbors before it is too late. And turn them into one of them, as well. These zombies seem to be somewhat self-aware. Although they are still in magical attack mode, because they are being called upon to neighbors about having them open the door immediately to let them through. This paralyzes with fear of the neighbors, until the old man among them orders them to run away before it is too late. For them, as well. Moment when another of the zombies goes crazy, and claims to be the owner of the entire building, and as such has the highest authority. This leaves the young man stunned due to the scare and the impression. But while he falls to the ground for the horror of being devoured, he goes and reacts before to ask him to go to the security room, since it is there the mechana with which they could defend themselves. At the same time that she says this, zombies use their inhumane force to destroy the door, and thus enter the apartment complex, about to devour the young man who is just now realizing what he said by. This one then gets up and comes out, running in a hurry to the security room, being pursued by the zombie that promises be the owner of the entire establishment. But before I can catch it, the boy gets to a powerful blow to the zombie's face. The latter falls to the ground completely defeated, and the young man alone sighs of relief, having been narrowly saved, raising the thumb to others to see that yes, after all. But things do not end there. But a horde of walkers appear at that moment through the main entrance, led by what appears to be a much stronger one and powerful than all the rest of them. This poses a serious problem for the entire group of survivors, more than anything else, because now that the doors are broken, zombies do not stop and cannot be contained, entering the bullfights to catch and devour to all those still inside the buildings. Goes and runs with the others through the zombie invasion. But there is nothing he can do to save himself, because in the end they all end up surrounded by walkers. Now it's the end, so don't try to delay it anymore. Although they are full of fear, know they can't do anything to stop it. While they await the imminent end of their lives, a red glint in the sky calls everyone's attention, accompanied by a powerful roar. This is actually another otherworldly crack for another of the demonic deities to pass through, which this time has the shape of a spider mixed with a lion and a human face. Just see. To this creature makes Bai to be filled with even more fear than I already had, because it means that the worst is about to come, and even becomes worse when the deity stands in front of her with a smile. Magdubber, this spider Chimera only expresses his joy because all the prey he has just encountered are all yours for the act. Then shoot a huge spider's web of her body with which she covers everything around her. Plus it traps the valley and neighbors trying to flee. But now they can no longer, because the spider chimera has trapped them in its horrible spider's web. The latter continues to spread as the championship moves. But in the meantime all this is happening by. Can't help but wonder what is all that is happening. And why out of nowhere, flies from the sky have begun to appear. But then he realizes that to his horror, that this is just the beginning, because the crack in the sky is still open. To be watching all this chaos and desolation with their own eyes, May comes to the conclusion that everything he told her, Xunin, during their first meeting was true, and that the end of the world is really here. And realizes that he must know something, because otherwise he would not have given such precise advice to save yourself for so long. What I didn't know was that while it was filling with fear at not knowing what to do, the spider began to approach her menacingly, with intentions of eliminating it first. On the other hand, the Perta is standing on a pole, on top of a pile of bodies that he himself has faced and defeated, all while some people watch it from the shadows to record and document that there is a superhuman among them, who can act as his great-grandfather in these dark times. Back with Soon in this last show, who found something in his way in search of the second demonic deity who came down from the heavens. This object is something known as a crystal core variant, something that only second-rate zombies do, or they have in their bodies, and that it can improve, increases skills, supernatural properties of those who consume it. What really concerns him is that the zombies are also evolving at an alarming rate, which only means that over time, things will become even more and more difficult for him. As soon as you get out of the battery of walkers that he has just defeated, meet one of his fans, that he had been recording it from a corner. This guy refers to him as if he were his new boss, and asks him what kind of spell he just used to get stronger or take down the zombies, but the main character remains silent in the face of his questions. The man continues, expressing her admiration for him, and reveals to him that all the time he was fighting alone against zombies, he and his team were recording it in a live stream. But when the guide tells her this, Sunan shoots a burning flame in his direction. That scares the man very much, because he was just trying to be nice, but the main character just destroyed his phone to be left alone, and then enters a store already destroyed by people. By checking the surroundings you understand that some people reacted faster than others, and as such all the food and resources have been plundered since before he arrived. When investigating further irregularities in the tank, finds that only a few boxes of food remain, canned noodles, instant soda, and other things like this, but nothing that can be useful for your needs. Daily routines he has with his sister. So using his spiritual door, absorbs everything within its tower dimension, infernal prison, and then left as if nothing had happened. Amidst the frightened glances of his admirers, they ask you, terrified that he will help them with his spiritual powers, and the Prota just keeps quiet, thinking for a moment that I could leave them to their own devices, as it has done with everyone else so far. But he's not a bad guy, so he leaves them some bags of noodles, instants to be maintained for a longer period of time, and men receive this gift, confused, but very grateful for their kindness. After this everyone sits down to rest for a moment, and talk about how good a person the main character is, because I found them saving the lives of zombies. And on top of that he also left them some bags of food. However, another of them complains, because he saw how Sunan took all supplies from the tank, while he only left them a few bags of noodles. Instance, treating them as if they were dogs with the works. His friends try to calm him down, but the guide is still angry, because he broke his phone, and now he will no longer be able to do streams on it to gain popularity, and with it enough money to buy more supplies. His hatred for the Prota is growing, because thanks to the internet, was able to discover that there are people who have already woken up cognitive abilities, but he doesn't, and that frustrates him because, wait, his stroke of luck that allows him to propel himself to fame, promising that he would also be a hero, to be concerned about people, and distribute resources equally. Little by little all the others begin to think he is right, except for one who believes that the Prota knows inamability, gave them something to resist for a while longer, and they can't treat him as a villain after that. But the stream tide is still upset and claims that he should have given them more food, and have taught them how to develop their powers, so that everything is fair. At that time, someone appears. Behind him is Eugen. That he was looking for the protagonist everywhere to take revenge. Even when men tell him on in which direction the Prota went, Eugen continues to attack him mercilessly. because he will now use them to carry out one of his experiments with the head of a Eugean zombie. Asks the man which is being attacked by a zombie that stops resisting, for it is serving the glorious purpose of saving humanity from the walkers, without paying attention to how much the man is suffering, because of the way it is eaten slowly. At the same time his friends watch the scene in awe, seeing that a zombie can eat so many people at one time. But this is all part of his plan. After this Yuji removes it and obtains a glass core from its interior, which can increase your level. Just as he thought, if walkers eat enough then can obtain the glass cores given, that condense all the power of the humans they devoured, to form a nucleus containing all its powers and strength. Without much thought Yuden absorbs the glass, thus becoming stronger, by once again feeling the surge of energy it had before. At the time of obtaining their skills, when he took the Anin pills his friends tell him, who already have 4 skill users among them, and that if he continues to grow stronger, no one will be able to stand up to him, not even the Perta, and they have already become masters in the method of producing glass cores, by feeding zombies with people, innocent, to increase their powers as walkers. Eugen, in response, tells them that his priority is to find the and eliminate it, but that while looking for it, can take advantage of the city's zombies, and continue to use them to produce more glass cores, to become stronger, and doesn't care what they have to do to get it, especially if it is a question of ending the lives of civilians. That's why his friends to hear it, they are very happy about the possibility of climbing even more their level of power, and begin the hunt for people to restart its strengthening method. Men who previously saved the Prota, they realize that Eugen and his friends are users of special skills, and therefore they are nothing more than pigs or animals to them. So they have no problems to use them as if they were earned for their more malevolent ends. Men try to escape, but it is impossible for them because the user's skills from before, the Bersha, is no longer there, and they lament that if he had not let this would not be happening to you but to Huge. Doesn't care about his screams, and in fact has the luxury of yawning, while his men do all the work for him. At this point no longer feels any empathy for other people, other than the same. At that time a nearby construction collapses, and they see that the Perta is heading towards that point, and are about to follow it at full speed. Passing by to see Sunan, he looks at his target, which is located 2,000 meters ahead, but with its current speed it should arrive soon, without realizing that Eugen has already discovered his position by turning around a corner discovers the demonic deity of yesteryear, which is about to be eaten, an old man who escaped along with his sister's grave. I see all this, and try to think of a way out of the problem, so remember that it hath its power of invisibility to be saved. She tries to use it again, but its energy was previously drained during the zombie escape from his apartment, and because of this, now you cannot use it again for some time to come. Try to think about what to do before the giant spider devours them all, and remembers how he got his powers, realizing that he still has some pills in the microwave. So the best option you have now is to try to take some more, and wait for them to have the same effect as at the time. As it is a desperate situation, Vane has no choice but to take desperate measures, and that's why he takes another pill without a second thought, in the hope that it will work and return it to invisible once again, or at least unlock a new power in it so that it can be brought out, and their neighbors in this horrible situation. At the same time that she manages to recover her energy, a woman, pregnant with whom she was also escaping, is about to be swallowed by the spider demon. Since apparently, the old man was not lucky enough to survive being his food, and by the looks of it will not be able to recover enough to be able to use their powers again, or unlock some kind of ability. That disappearance of the giant mirror, but then it appears out of nowhere to save her by holding her in his arms, using his fire powers to summon his sword in the process, and prepare to fight the spider. Once you get the pregnant woman to safety, asks him to leave while he is confronted with a demonic deity, and that's just what he does together with Bei. But before the Perta begin its battle against, notes that its shell has fire resistance. So taking into account that their powers use this element could be seen extremely small in terms of damage, and this could bring you serious problems. The giant spider sees it as a meal fight in place of an enemy or potential danger. So he tries to pounce on him to devour him. But the Prota dodges it before it even touches it. He jumps up and pulls an axe out of his infernal dimension, using it as his new weapon to confront this enemy. For if his armor is resistant to hellfire, then you just need to break it with a weapon stronger, and then a sword. But since that does not work, propels itself against a spider's web to attack with its flames and burn the corpse from its nest. The spider realizes that this is not an easy prey, so she calls on her children to help her in battle. The Prota can't believe this, but out of nowhere a lot of spiders start to appear from the streets, willing to help their mother in the fight against their most dangerous enemy so far. On the other hand, Eugen and his friends continue to hunt zombies, obtaining several crystal cores in the process, with which they become stronger as time goes by and year journey. They believe that with some more Eugen it will be invincible, and may defeat any that comes his way. But as they hunt, more and more powerful zombies are appearing, which indicates that the chest range could be increasing to a level alarmingly faster than they expected, even without them having to intervene to do so. When they advance a little they discover a nest of giant spiders, and following the trail of fire, they notice that the Prota is nearby, so that they are ready to follow it so that Eugen can take revenge for what he did to her, him and his family. It is there that they see one of the little one's spiders approaching, so they try to attack it. But his friends are not enough, so Eugen jumps into the action on his own, starting to fight the hatchlings as well. But unlike them, he is a prodigy, and therefore can face them with greater ease and cause much greater harm than they do, as long as no shoulders are piled up at the same time. But the good thing is that the main army is focused on the Prota, so no have many spiders to hunt. He ends up being covered by the spider's liquid, which she finds very unpleasant. It just touches her skin. But when he tries it with his tongue, feels that he has the aura of a crystal core similar to that of zombies, and therefore comes to the conclusion that it possesses the same properties as consuming these crystals. So he decides to continue hunting spiders in order to feed on their energy, as it is similar to that of zombies. And since they have a larger number of, he and his men and how many baby spiders they encounter, making this not a survival mission, but a mission to climb up the level with spiders. At that his friends see the Prota fighting the giant spider, and Eugen comes to the conclusion that if they focus on smaller spiders, will be able to obtain even more benefits, as the main character is distracting the most dangerous hero, while they can take care of the little ones, to get much more power out of them. That is why he orders his men to hunting spider cubs, because while they are is in charge of the chief engineer, they can harvest most of the profits for themselves by consuming their bodies, absorbing their energy to increase their abilities. The Unity protects them without noticing it, and at best, the fight against boss will be so difficult for him that he will end up losing, and that will only leave them with the top prize, and will even be saved the discomfort of going after him when he is finished. The battle between the Prota and the giant spider intensifies. She tries to use her to protect themselves by using them as shields and weapons, but the Prota uses his scythe and its fire to incinerate them before they touch it, because even if the mother has a great resistance to fire, that does not seem to apply to the, since they are much weaker than the main spider. After cleaning the area with its flames, the Prota attacks the largest spider, managing to hurt her with his scythe. But he doesn't stop there, as she wants to see if she can reproduce the spiders, or if he will finish it off first. Intrigued to know who is faster between the two to destroy the other, if he who believes messages to help each other in the fight or the one who eliminates them, not after another with fire. It is then that you notice the presence of Eugen and his men who are hunting and devouring the spiders that are found in the, since they are not even finding blast cores in them, so they simply devour them as if they were their food. Upon observing it, the Prota realizes that in his past life, Eugen was already someone talented because of his powers in the family. But now it seems that even without his infernal prison record, is still a skilled person, since it could have reached where it is now, because of his natural talent. Even having a family situation very bad thanks to the intervention of the Prota. One of the friends of Eugen congratulates him for having become so strong, thinking he could kill Sunan if he sets his mind to it. But he thinks it is best to wait, to leave the poison in poor health, and thus eliminate it shortly thereafter to make sure that they do not have to make it unnecessary energy expenditure and effort, and also wants to continue enjoying more the tingle of turning stronger, same as he felt when he recovered with the pills. Saying when at home the prota arrives on top of them, and claims that's disgusting even for him. But even though Eugen's men want to fight, they know that if they ring is there with them means that the giant spider also, and was in fact running after to attack him once again. The letter brought it on purpose so that he could eat it, them in their place, and before this Eugen begins to fight against the army of hatchlings that surround it. Soon enjoys seeing his enemy in trouble, but the letter promises him that now that he is a user of skill, will kill him as soon as he can get rid of all the hatchlings. Hearing this, Shunan warns him that he also had something important to tell him, and try to do so at the same moment, taking advantage of the fact that they met again. But before the spider mother can say it, she appears in front of him to continue the fight, and is forced to leave his talk for later, since he has to face it to leave them alone, saying goodbye to his former best friend, as if it were nothing. This makes Eugen angry, because he feels that Pertut is underestimating him despite having become so strong, and that he was always supposed to be better in everything between the two of us. One of his men begins to run out of bullets as you face the army. Endless number of baby spiders, and therefore suggests that they undertake the withdrawal immediately, as they are not as strong as their leader. And they also do not know whether the latter is in a position to face only a horde of heroes of such a diameter and size, but Eugen orders them to hang the Pertat as of the place, and while saying that, something strange starts to happen to his body because now of dark and evil energy, similar to the one with zombies, begins to possess it and return it more like an angel than a human. Out of nowhere it gets much stronger, but begins to lose his sanity and steps by feeling as if they were slowly approaching being a god. One of his men tries to get their attention to get them out of here, but Eugen does not listen to it and continues hunting spiders to eat them as if they were candy, as he wants to become stronger to crush on its own, and show him once and for all that he is, and has always been superior to him, in every possible way shows you. Then to his servant who has become so strong now, as it can catch and crush a spider with one hand, which was impossible before, because at the beginning of the hunt, had to hit them with all his strength, only to cause them some harm. And that's why he wants more, because he knows that the more spiders eliminate stronger it will become, but all to beat the Pertat. Not to protect his family or himself, only to comply and satisfy their desire for revenge against him. The interest Hanto soon faces the spider mother, which has a very hard shell, reinforced even against physical attacks, in that she jumps into the air along with her spider's web, getting trap it in a cocoon to keep it, and turn it over. Easy prey because an enemy that cannot move is completely defenseless. Just when it seems that he was going to eat it on, praises her for being quite brave to approach, when he knows he is a user of infernal fire, and having said that he begins to burn the webs with his powers, which extends to the mother spider, that ends up being absorbed by the infernal dimension of sound. In spite of this, the demonic deity does not give up, and attacks with his spiritual form, which is the size of one of its hatchlings, and jumps behind ringing out of nowhere. But he has no problem catching and crushing her with one hand in the same way as Eugen did. Only in his case it was much stronger, because it directly crushed the mother of the spiders. Done so, it obtains the 4th level of supernatural ability, because it completely absorbed the power of a new demonic entity. But then, his infernal prison begins to undergo an abrupt change, which makes you feel very hot, due to the large number of fire and energy that is accumulating around it. At the end of the process, the main character feels like the flame of the Crimson Lotus shines around him. But not only that, but it can see itself in a kind of 3-dimensional map with which you can to be the only holder of the Crimson Lotus infernal flame. And you can also realize that a wild beast landed somewhere else, not far from where it is at the moment. Realizes that his new ability allows him to place oneself in others, wild beasts that are around them or to individuals. This ability will be very useful in the future, both to place itself in a place of as to see potential friends or enemies on routes other than the map and avoid receiving surprise attacks or, as the current case may be, to locate the beasts more quickly, powerful in order to absorb them, and prevent others who are as powerful as he is, and take away the reward for defeating them. But as soon as he finishes analyzing his new power, notices that he is going, and the woman he saved earlier, survived the attack of the giant spider. Thanks to the invisibility she developed during her problem with her friend, by taking the blood pill. Before you could approach them to help them, a loud roar is heard in the area interrupting him, and makes him understand that the fight is not over, although it is not exactly a failure. This is caused by Eugen, which has accessed level 2 of the supernatural ability, and has also commented that there are 9 levels, thanks to his vision of the Tree of Life, which is where it comes from, his powers, and from where he has all his new knowledge on the spiritual power system. So he feels fortunate to have so much unique knowledge and skills, feeling as if he was blessed by the gods or as if it were the chosen in the apocalypse, and believes that he will become a god if he makes it past the 9th level. In the midst of its shouts of joy, notices the presence of Sunan, and launches himself towards him to show him that he has always been the most inferior between the two, and that it continues to be so, but it will try to humiliate him in the worst possible way. By 4. Eugen the Prota with a single punch sends him flying away, demonstrating the difference in skill between the two. Eugen can't believe there is so much difference, if it is on level 2, but the Prota is at a much higher point. It is then that he takes the opportunity to make fun of him, for if it weren't for his family's money, it would not have strengthened so quickly. Yuchi does not lose hope of facing the star and beating him, so it starts devouring the remaining spiders. Sunan mocks how Eugen used to be more cautious, but his desire for revenge has made him abandon his reason, and completely forgot to order an investigation to know whether consuming spiders has side effects. Eugen thinks that the Prota tries to scare him so that he does not become stronger and cannot attain the state of God, but Sunan asks you to take a better look at his vision of the Tree of Life. Eugen does, but he still thinks he's in the way, right, to become a god, as their visions have not changed at all. So he thinks Sunan is trying to stop him. So now that he has regained some energy, prepares for the next round. As it has become stronger, Eugen prepares to strike his next blow and try to end the life of the protagonist. But before taking a step forward, see, like the ground below it collapses, turning into a cliff. And then a lot of beings from the underworld appear, who ask you to join them, giving to understand that he did not really see clearly what the Prota I was trying to tell him a moment ago. Eugen finally realizes that something is wrong with their powers, but still do not understand what it is, for he still thinks he is the one chosen by the gods, and therefore this should not be happening to you. Sunan explains what zombification is, which should be obvious to the future, to defeat so many heroes, and having observed so many people become zombies, since the symptoms in your body are quite identical to those of an infected person, only that in their case they are much more subtle, until the moment when they take effect. Eugen still does not understand why this is happening to him, this if he is a very talented waiter. The Prota explains to him that in his past life, many just like him tried their own methods for creating hybrid cores based on sacrifices, or try to devour flies such as small spiders to absorb their spiritual energy, and become much stronger by incorporating them into your body. But consumption inside these is I found them doing, provoking what is now happening to Eugen. Sunan informs him that exists a way to save those affected by this disease, but it is only with a pill, sanin of which he has already consumed all at home. So there is not one more left. Upon realizing this, Eugen's hope plummets along with him, and the Prota goes on to explain to him how it is that, if I had taken his time to absorb and purify the evil energy of heroes, then it could have become more powerful over time, and to allow it to be cultivated and purified on its own, without having to rely on such pills in the future. And as if that wasn't enough, confirms that his path to being a god, it is not a dream, as many already think, that you can really surpass the 9th barrier level with sufficient time. It is then that Eugen puts his pride aside, and asks the star on his knees to save him, proposing to be his slave if he does, in exchange for a sanin pill. Sunan reminds him that they have a sibling-like relationship, but at the moment when Eugen smile kicks him to imply that he will not help him, for it not only bothered him, but also tried to harm his sister. So not even the gods can save him. For the friendship they had remained completely in the past. If they ever had it for real, he did. Continues to bother him by showing him the pills he loves so much, bragging to his face that with them the Spurs like him could have upgraded in level, without suffering involved. But since they no longer have such a good relationship, does not intend to give them away, passing it on, for exactly the same thing that happened to him during the last moments of his past life. Eugen at this jumps on him to attack him, but go ahead. Looks like it's nothing and ends up with it in one fell swoop. She did so because she could hear the story between the two of them, and understands pretty good, which means that your best friend betray you since she betrayed herself. Happened to him when he got his powers some time ago. I also needed to thank him for the secrecy of the pills as they saved his life. And with one more stroke he makes sure to finish off Eugen. They came to read on the internet that after killing a powerful infected, these create crystal cores by accumulating a great deal of energy and power of its victims, and finds one inside the body of Eugen. Since it consumed many baby spiders, as well as second-order zombie crystal cores. The Prota expected this, since it evolved into a zombie of this same level in full combat, due to the poor energy accumulated up to that moment. But as soon as the girl offers him the stone, he rejects it, and allows He-Bit to increase his powers. She accepts the gift, and begins to absorb it, although she is not sure how she should do it. She can feel how all her energy has recovered. And not only that, but has also increased considerably, compared to the first time he took the Seinen pill. Despite this she knows to be careful, and know your own limits, for if he tries to become too strong, he'd end up just like Eugen, completely consumed by power. If Madness of Heroes does not defeat her and breaks her mind first, AIM recognizes that Valley Seal is an interesting lover, as it is not invisibility as such, but completely absent, which means that it could not affected by physical attacks, or even avoid being noticed by creatures. Extremely powerful, and if you learn how to use it correctly, then its chances of survival will be very high during the apocalypse. Before he leaves, Dance offers a deal to the Prota. She knows he came to hunt the giant spider, and knows that over time, these heroes will become much more powerful, and that they will soon needs them to increase the level of his powers. Despite all this, and how strong it is, I knows that it is still just one person. And that is why he offers to help him hunt more flies. But that's not all it offers you, but also suggests being a resource finder, a slayer, or even bait first. When Sunan asks him what he's trying to achieve, she replies that she wants to become stronger but does not want to force him to accept. The Prota gives him the mission to go to the hospital, Shana, to put an end to the boy who is there, and bring him whatever he finds. She accepts the mission without hesitation, but before leaving the Prota warns him that there are similar mirrors, or more dangerous than the spider he just faced by. Knows that, but also knows that if you do not find a way to fight these beasts on their own, then you will not live too long in the apocalypse. Sunan is by his courage, so he marks it with his fire so that he can keep an eye on it, because if it manages to pass, the test would not mind having her as a partner. But first he has to take care of 2 other mirrors. On the other hand, Eugen's father just found out what happened to his son, so he orders his men to go after to his sister again, because she believes that she is the one who should keep some pills. And the man guides them all to the sister's location of the Prota, because no matter how strong he is, she is still an ordinary person. So he comes out with a lot of cars following him on the way to Sunan's sister. At the same time, in its shelter, she is watching news of attacks and epidemics that are around the world. And soon after, even the newscast stopped broadcasting, which begins to give you an idea of what is going on in the world. While watching the red moon in the sky at that, Xiaoyuan wonders if his brother is okay, but the turtle reassures her by telling her that our protagonist is quite powerful and unlikely to face any serious problem. The girl then asks the turtle, "Select what skill you should learn." In response appears she, an ancient turtle spirit that manifests 3 talismans after a moment of contemplation. Xiaoyan extends his hand toward a specific talisman. The companion of our hero, and praises for his compassion and kindness. noting that this particular ability will soon be of great help to you. Xiaoyun is lost in a world of power, cure and ancestral abilities. The wild turtle tells him to calm his mind and absorb the forces little by little, warning me not to be greedy. Despite the visible nervousness on the girl's face, begins to communicate in the spirit, calling him Uncle Tortugo, while the dead turtle explains the specific properties of the talisman. Hank wonders how much the girl will be able to absorb on her first attempt, while Yadhim is busy with her training. The turtle senses that a group is approaching the building. Artayan and his clan members. The scene changes to the antagonist, who gives orders to his men, placing its three main skill users, Psy Blade and Yellow Lightning, at the head of the group. Orders the rest of its subordinates launching a direct frontal assault, and this they are about to obey. Suntan believes that with 3 users of skills and an arsenal of deadly, capturing a weak girl will be a simple task. A group known as Sea Sharks tries to force entry, but as soon as they push the door, the magic that protects it repels them. The men are thrown at a great distance from the building. A second team is moving forward too, mocking the first group for its apparent weakness. But when trying to enter, the same mysterious force hits them. The impact is so strong that several men suffer arm and leg fractures. Their leader then orders them to aim for the windows, command that if they cannot be broken, use bombs and other high-grade explosives. Men prepare to use a bomb capable of opening a banking vault just to enter the small zoo building. A soldier warns to its commander that an explosion this could cause the collapse and finish off the girl inside the structure. But the leader dismisses the concern, stating that it is simply their destiny. When the pump detonates, does not leave a single scratch on the building. The explosion makes the glossy security barrier visible to the naked eye. They love men, wondering what kind of defense they are facing. The 3 skill users finally get ahead of themselves, stating that they will take care of the situation, combining their unique powers in a synchronized attack. Finally manage to break the barrier. Yellow Ray enters the building alone, while the other 2 users wait outside, wondering how the championship will develop. It is revealed that the boy with electric powers is the strongest among them, reason why it was first sent to eliminate any obstacle that would protect against Oyun. After a few moments, a blinding light radiates from all over the building. The soldiers, Sun Tian and the remaining skill users assume that Lightning has been successful in his mission, but they soon feel that something is wrong, which drives Alif and Anzai to enter. The inside is completely dark, so Zai uses its thermal vision to scan the environment, detects movement on the floor, and prepares to fire an arrow. But suddenly a small turtle falls on his nose. He turns the creature away, but when he looks again, the target is gone. The turtle is furious, declaring that she is not just a turtle but and they are, warns that she is not compared to ordinary being. Using its control over the water, the space turtle creates a huge wave that expels both skill users of the building, then emerges herself, carrying with her the defeated lightning bolt, tells those present that by nature is calm and does not want to hurt anyone. One of the skill users interrupts it, ordering the soldiers to open fire. A hail of bullets hits her, but she remains unharmed, declaring that nothing hurts her more than the insult of being called an ordinary sea turtle. Using its magic, redirects the trajectory of bullets towards attackers. Soldiers begin to fall, hit by their own fire. Seeing the devastation, Sleef and I coordinate a joint attack. Their powers combined manage to catch the turtle inside a special cage made with your elemental abilities. Believing that it has neutralized the threat, the 2 users prepare to re-enter to the building and finish off Xiaoyan. However, the turtle dies, begins to expand again to its gigantic original size. Is now completely enraged by the boldness of trying to take her life. In a state of blind fury, roars to the water that rises and swallows the attackers who try to fleeing, even powerful users. Sleef and I, trapped in the torrential flood, beg for their lives as they struggle to stay afloat. But the turtle is cold and relentless, stating that those who try to harm it deserve no mercy. However, while the turtle is busy annihilating the army outside, leaves a blind spot. Santain, driven by pain and hatred, manages to enter the building undetected, finds Xiaoyun standing by the window on his back, observing the chaos outside. With tears running down his face, shouts that Yujin was his only son and that Xiaoyun must pay in blood for his death. Aim at the girl without hesitation, The sound of a bang resounds throughout the room. But if today one is unharmed, a brilliant security barrier placed there by the dead tortoise has stopped the bullet. Outside, the turtle perceives the danger, but decides not to intervene immediately. Understands that in this brutal new post-apocalyptic world, Shoyu cannot depend on a protector forever. Must learn to master the art of Tian and fight for herself. Noting the withdrawal of direct turtle protection, Sun Tian takes the opportunity, brings out a high-level heavy weapon, and begins to unload a barrage of projectiles, specialized towards the girl. Under the relentless pressure of high-caliber fire, the barrier begins to crack, becoming brittle. The face of Sun Tian squirms in madness as he screams for him to die, with the finger firmly on the trigger. While the last line of defense between them begins to break, are that they have consumed by madness. Throws his weapon empty to one side and pulls out a jagged knife, hitting the barrier, with primitive despair. Acts like a complete lunatic, driven by the to eliminate towards Wujun and consummate his revenge for the loss of his son. When the barrier is about to break, Sun Tian is preparing to eliminate it, declaring his plan to send a photo of his body to his brother, Boxer, telling him not to worry, because her brother will soon accompany her in death. However, he threatens her against his brother, triggers a transformation in Gaoyun, stands up, and invisible anger invades his face, realizes he can't die there, as his death would cause immense pain to Sunan. To prevent his brother's disappearance, determines that she must be the one who kills Untayan. The two begin to fight inside the building, while the wild turtle remains outside, looking up at the sky and letting the reflection happen. During the struggle, Choyu informs Untayan that Qianzar is not limited to saving lives, but you can also remove them. Warns him that he will never forget those who think hurt his brother, releasing their new abilities. Attacks the antagonist. In a matter of seconds, Sun Tian realizes that his end has come, shouts in a last act of challenge, claiming that he cannot die without avenging Yujin. As his life fades away, casts a final curse against Shoyun and his brother, telling them to wait for their own coming deaths. With these final words Tian falls dead. His soul is now facing a formidable demigod who demands total surrender. The deity offers him a deal, tempting, stating that if he undergoes, might consider returning it to the world of the living. Consumed by his desire for revenge, Sun Tian accepts, and surrenders completely to the power of the god. As a result, demigod manifests itself in the real world, visibly enjoying the intense resentment and hatred emanating from the spirit of Sonia. By scanning the immediate area, the deity detects the turtle in and towards Oyam, deciding that they will be his next feast. The scene changes back to our protagonist Sunan, who is relentlessly slaughtering monsters to increase even more their level of cultivation. During its hunt makes a gloomy hole. These demons continue to remove lives and poisoning the environment even after being eliminated. Notes that they are systematically destroying the world, and points out that if this destruction continues to go unchecked, there will not be a single piece of fertile soil left on the ground. To avoid further contamination, Tsunami will incinerate the reflection of the he has just eliminated, then walks away, determined to eliminate the remaining threats in the vicinity. With his newly acquired vision of penetrating fire, can now easily detect and track locations, exact contours, which allows it to hunt with lethal efficiency. Sunan arrives at his next destination where finds an enormous images of humans gathered at the foot of a tree, gigantic quickly. Identifies that the tree is in fact a demonic creature, although it remains cautious as he watches the scene curiously. Zombies in the area refuse to approach the base of the tree. What has led to the survivors to believe that this place is a safe haven. However, Sunan feels that something is not right. In examining individuals who have been there for some time, note that your pants are empty and strange, which suggests that they are under some form of influence. While Sunan reflects on the situation, Man steps forward to address the crowd. Sunan recognizes it immediately. Is Supervisor Chen, his former superior of the company where he used to work. Chen begins a speech about the horrors of that zombies and the monsters that currently are destroying the world. Assures the interpreter that they are perfectly safe under the branches of the tree, but adds a sinister condition. Staying there requires a sacrifice. When desperate people ask what is required of them, Chen presents the tree, which has a trunk in the shape of a face. Grotesque affirms that the tree is in fact a benevolent demigods who want to protect civilians, but explains that this needs offerings and wonders to maintain its protection. While at the beginning people feel relief at having been saved. costs, and demands to know exactly what kind of wisdom this god requires. Shin recognizes his name, smiles, thinking that his former employee has arrived on the spot, perfect to serve your purposes. Then reveals the horrendous truth. To keep the god hidden, the group must offer a human sacrifice every 2 hours. The snow remains instantly shocked and horrified, wondering how a true god could feed on human beings, who quickly manipulates their fear, arguing that God only requires one person to save the rest, while the zombies from outside would devour them all without hesitation, urges survivors to listen carefully, insisting that the tree, with a human face, is a merciful entity, claims that the creature does not only consume human lives, but offers a miraculous reward in return, paints a bleak picture of the future, warning the crowd that in a few days, all food and water will disappear, and will starve to death. However, he promises that in exchange for a sacrifice, the tree will produce 3 fruits of ginseng, each capable of sustaining a person for a whole week. Chan manipulates the desperate crowd even more, ensuring that these fruits grant supernatural abilities, citing his own supposed power of communication with demigods as a test. Desperate to fix people begin to beg for the fruit, but Shin reminds them that the price must first be paid, that the sacrifice must come from us. As the group enters a heated discussion about who should die, Chen suggests that they should identify and sacrifice first to a sinner, promising to choose carefully, while the crowd debates. Responded with an incisive question, asking how Chen plans distributing only 3 fruits among so many people. Grandma, realizing it, suddenly the numbers don't add up, joins the questioning. A nervous Chen babbles that the fruits will go to those who contribute the most. Human bursts out laughing, mockingly asking if Chen will create a graph of us to measure its performance, just as they did in the world. Furious at being ridiculed, Chen shouts that he is the representative, secret of the tree, and demands respect. Several young people, indoctrinated under the influence of the tree, step forward to threaten Sunan. But our protagonist remains impassive, openly exposes Chen's past by telling the story of how he used to exploit his employees in his former company, notes that Chen has not changed, is simply using a god as a new method to eliminate people and maintain power. Sunan concludes by coldly asking whether Chen he has even a shred of shame left in his body. Supervisor Chen loses completely composure and screams hysterical to the crowd to kill Sunan, accusing him of blasphemy against the sacred tree. Driven by despair and the promise of the fruit of ginseng, survivors begin to protest against our protagonist. Ready to tear it apart, Sunan shouts at them to open their eyes and reveals the horrible truth. Fruit is not a gift, but demonic growth, forged with blood, flesh, and souls of the sacrificed. Warns that anyone who consumes it will become a living of the god. A half-dead grandfather, indistinguishable from a zombie, while darkness doubts. Zoom in points directly at Chen's hand as he looks at. People see how Chen is forced to reveal his limb, which has been transformed grotesquely in a cluster of wooden branches and bark. Without any shame, Chen tells them that in this apocalypse, the only thing that matters is makes fun of her fear, telling them that if they abandon the shade of the tree, the zombies will devour them once again. Urges to end Sunan, so that they can embrace the transformation and become powerful heroes like him. Indoctrinated aggression throws itself against Sunan, but our protagonist remains serene, stating that today marks the end of the supervisor's life. End his fire skills to incinerate his former boss. But Chen is suddenly mind-absorbed by the trunk of the demonic tree, immersing itself in its crust. Follows a heavy silence, until a distorted voice calls out Sunan's name. Supervisor Chen emerges from tree with human face, now fully fused with its form. Become a total demon is Jacta that he and the tree, sacred, now exist as a single entity, asserting that he has attained immortality while Sunan is destined to die. Imperturbable Sunan simply snaps his fingers, intensifying the flames that envelop once again the form. Demonic Chen. Supervisor Chen burns in the fire while Sunan heads to the tree with a human face. Our protagonist note that this creature is significantly more powerful than the other competitors. When the beast begins to slaughter humans, survivors scream at Sunan, blaming him for having provoked her, argue that without their interference, could have sacrificed a single person, and allow the rest to transform by eating the fruit. The impales humans one by one with its branches. Our cigarette lights the wood by cutting the arrows, but urges survivors to flee for their lives. Those who are still trapped by the creature beg for salvation cursing that if they cannot be saved, Sunan should die with them. When a horde of zombies pounces on civilians, our boy eliminates every threat, did not die in a matter of minutes, orders the princess to flee. As he turns around to face the threat, the survivors wonder, why didn't he do more to protect them? Even when he ensures his escape by staying behind, the humble tree rages all his lethal intention on Sunan. Sunan launches a direct challenge, swearing to destroy the poisonous tree first. In response, the creature catches it, excluding R into the depths of a sphere of constrictor Lannis. Observing the interior sounds, realizes that this opponent is unexpectedly resistant, concludes that is required a new strategy to the beast. The tree affectionately observes with nervousness, while our boy drinks water calmly. Our reflection reflects that it can wear down the creature, murmuring sooner or later, before remaining silent. Intrigued and restless, the tree demands to know what it is referring to. Inside the whole of the monstrous creature, Sunan settles in a banquet, luxurious next to Sudiji and the black bear. Sudiji warns him that even being a demon of a second ranked, this entity remains problematic and should be eliminated immediately. Both colleagues watch the food hungry. What carries his lullaby? The decree that whoever proposes the solution to defeat the tree shall be entitled to eat. Sudiji suggests that a tree falls easily in the face of lightning. If Ligenjiko operates on it will be easy to destroy. Suddenly the turtle demonstrates for urgent warning. If Oyan is in grave danger, a demigod is called Teraki has been summoned to Earth, and the wild turtle fears that she cannot handle the threat on her own. The scene changes abruptly. Sunan is standing behind the LA Genji before the prisoner can refuse to help. Our protagonist opens the cage at once, stating that there is no time left for negotiations. As a prison jailer, Sunan orders Genji to leave and opens his cell. The governor cannot refuse this order. If I did, the jailer would have the right to execute him. As the blood moon descends, a demonic aura fills the air, exciting the tree-faced monster. All of a sudden, lightning strikes the butt of the tree, leaving him terrified, and the tree with the human face resides in fear at the sight of the hit. Our boy then orders the destruction of the creature, evil, what leads Heiji to reunite all the energy of and launch an attack against the tree. Taken by surprise, the boy is stunned by the sudden blow, but Heiji quickly launches another powerful impact, burning it severely. The Entrestanto, a woman with hair, black man, and his group are found with several corpses. She regrets having lost the wooden spirit of the tree that would have been useful to him. His men report movement in the hospital, China, so they are heading there. What makes the woman wonder, who managed to eliminate the tree beast before her? At the same time, heavy rain soaks the zoo of Jade. The lion cage has been severely damaged, and inside it, a lion with red eyes holds the wolf's shield after eliminating the entire pack. However, the menacing rookie tears the lion completely apart. A powerful demonic aura surrounds the zoo, wiping out all the creatures inside. Orochi reveals his true form, while the snakes, understood by the aura, they become demonic and launch themselves against the turtle. The turtle is quickly protected, and when a snake pounces, is repelled and stopped by the defense. The remaining snakes relentlessly attack the turtle, gradually weakening it. Finally, the turtle's chest is broken, leaving her hurt and exhausted. Orochi mocks turtle's magical resistance, commenting that it is now an easy target. Despite her injuries, the turtle remains calm, aware that incompetence cannot be allowed. If our protagonist fails, he will take care of his punishment. Orochi advances by mocking the supposed fall of the underworld, remembering that gods and great heroes have already been eliminated by the 5 ways of the gods. Dismisses Sunan's strength and questioning how formidable can truly be our reflection. The turtle provokes him in response, pointing out that Yamato was nothing more than a Susanoo servant. Suddenly a fierce demonic aura as the turtle's defenses, destroying what was left of his chest. The impact leaves her very seriously injured, while the whole area shakes, filling with terror towards William. The turtle notices that the attack could only have come from Susanoo himself. With an ironic appearance, asks if Orochi is really that important for Susanoo to come personally to confront him. Gathering its strength, the turtle conjures up a powerful water ring, warning that they should not underestimate Sunan. Utters powerful words, causing an explosion of golden light to devastate the area. Toad hides in a corner, trembling and crying in the midst of Xiaoyuan chaos, panics when the sharpened Fangs of the huge snake approach her. Wounded and revealing his true form of snake and radium. A killer intent so intense that even the turtle, despite being seriously injured, she may suddenly feel it. Orochi appears with 7 heads, sowing terror in all present. At this critical moment, Genji and Sunan arrive for great relief from the turtle. A bolt of lightning falls from the sky and destroys completely to the 7-headed snakes. At the sight of the cherub remains of its serpentine forms, Orochi is horrified. I just understood what just happened. When he looks up he sees Genji, who presents himself as the reincarnation of the star, often of the 3rd generation of Yu. Determined to eradicate evil, Genji throws a powerful bolt against Orochi, calling him. Ended up perceiving the imminent danger. Our protagonist orders you to quickly to the retreating turtle, to the tower and recover after the grueling battle. Inside the great mortal prison, Daki tends to the turtle's wounds. Turtle warns him not to underestimate Orochi, explaining that it has 8 heads and 8 lives. Outside our chest and Genji remain on alert as long as a demonic aura, purple, revolves around them. 2 snake heads launch an attack, furtive in the back, but Genji reacts instantly, dodging and counter-attacking with a lightning strike. One of the snakes releases a gas, toxic, that wounds the beast, leaving it. Genji turns to Sunan and asks him what his next move should be. Orochi locates Sunan and mocks him, calling him a mere mortal, superficial, unworthy of the title of prison lord. Comparing it to Susan, no, Sunan challenges the snake, but Orochi despises it, claiming that he does not deserve a real duel. Undisturbed, our boy offers you a deal if you lose. Orochi must recognize him as his teacher. The snake laughs sarcastically, mocking that a simple, Yankees human being dares to try to submit to call Orochi the legendary beast of Japan. Sunan's words reach one of the snake heads, which promises to inflict the most terrible pain on you. Taking these threats as acceptance of the challenge, Sunan considers the duel to be over. One of his eyes shines, while the snake heads, they throw themselves with their jaws open, surrounding the Heiji. Sunan quickly recognizes Orochi is using some heads as a, while the main one gathers strength for a lethal attack. Our boy quietly points to the hiding place of the main head. The strategy. Orochi is startled and hastily denies any plan of that type. Sunan's psychological pressure destabilizes him, although he tries to convince himself that it is just a coincidence. He roars and orders the other snakes to escort him. A snake advances, but is crushed instantly by a powerful blow from the claw of a black bear. The rain falls heavily on the city. The chaos reigns while zombies fill streets and civilians flee, terrified. A mother desperately comforts her daughter. Humanos has turned purple, while the girl cries for help. Kneeling woman prays for a hero back in battle. The old bears a hail of attacks, each with a different technique, mercilessly destroying the heads of snakes. Orochi is increasingly disconcerted. I just understood why so many powerful beings support Sunan, moved by darkness. The Lord of the Snakes asks about the true identity of our hero, but Sunan simply responds with a smile. Realizing that the situation is critical, Orochi decides it is more important inform their superiors about the fact that continuing the fight, launches an attack, sudden action, forcing Sunan and his team to counterattack while handling a dust storm. Weakened by his wounds, Orochi goes to Oi and focuses his attention on her. At the last moment, our female protagonist, blocking the snake before it can reach it. Orochi soon realizes that they are playing, is watching his every move. Our protagonist notes that one of the heads of Orochi has and fled in secret. If the 7th snake were actually escaping, Sunan would not bother to pursue him. After all, to claim their heads would already be a great victory. But instead Orochi goes after his sister, what pushes our hero's patience to the limit. Sunan's eyes burn with fury and an aura of fire envelops him as he unsheaths his flaming sword. Completely determined to take down Orochi, Mr. Snake despises the threat, convinced that our boy, a simple human, could never defeat him, mocks him even more, threatening to torture into enraged Oyam. Our protagonist invokes a fire dragon that launches itself against Orochi. Mr. Snake counterattacks and manages to bite Sunan's arm, just to discover, for your surprise, that it transforms into pure flame without hesitation. Sunan cuts off one of Orochi's heads. The snake is still fighting. For understanding the true strength of our charisma, the Tristanto, DGE and Black Bear fight fiercely. destroying the remaining snake heads. By witnessing this, Orochi realizes that the situation is deteriorating, quickly has only 4 lives left. Desperate to change the course of the battle, decides that his only option is to attack the soul of Sun and Orochi, slips into the consciousness of our protagonist, with the intention of delving into their memory, wants to find out how they sound, trying to command so many demons and plans, turn it into his personal note. A curious tower and, bewildered, approaches it. The instant it touches its surface, a wave of energy hits him, making him die in agony. To see a small hole in the base of the tower, the Lord of the Serpent slides inside, barely surviving inside the tower, is surrounded by snow. Countless red eyes watch him from the shadows. Alma will have nothing. Orochi is so overwhelming that it doesn't even. Season you had made him feel so afraid. Wonders if there are sealed gods there, but quickly discards the idea. Ill terror low consume, and screams as mental pain shatters his mind outside. Our protagonist observes the spectacle, while the black bear and Gingilarian with the remaining heads are, perceiving the danger, retreat towards Orochi's body, who twists and screams like a madman. But witnessing this, Stunan can't help but sigh. Never expected the snake to invade his consciousness. All present feel a mixture of pity and disbelief, coinciding in silence in that Orochi has acted with stupidity. Doji trembles when he realizes that the master snake has descended directly to the 4th level of the tower. Can barely imagine the horrors he must have witnessed to drive him to madness. Just when our grandfather is preparing to put an end to, Orochi notices a strange aura spreading across the earth. The moon has disappeared, replaced by a monstrous eye that radiates demonic energy. The turtle understands immediately. Shizano has arrived. Orochi shouts desperately, stating that he knows secrets that could save him life, but Genji blocks his escape attempt. Before Genji can advance, a terrifying force immobilizes him, preventing us from letting the enemy escape. The black bear prepares, and Dottie nods at that moment. Sunan surrounds Orochi with flames, and eliminates him on the spot. After execution, our protagonist tears the soul from the serpent, and throws it into the tower, demon suppressor, as if she were a princess, then shakes the dust of the hands with indifference. The scene leaves his 3 allies genuinely impressed, but their relief is short-lived, since an invisible pressure descends on it. From a Susan crack, looks angrily at Sunan, outraged at having been deceived. In an instant the tower, demon suppressor, is bombarded with deadly lightning. Shuzano falls to earth at the speed of light, heading directly towards our chest. Simultaneously, tremendous strength assaults the tower in a torrent of evil souls. Sunan feels his energy is depleted, as he drains himself completely its spiritual strength. In his past life, the most it saw go down were some demigods of general rank. And even then, Orochi was supposed to appear only at midnight. But this time, due to the invocation of Sun, Tien, the relegation occurred before, which also led to the arrival of early Susanoo. The entire dimensional barrier is now shattered, and a god has emerged too soon for the world to support. The turtle can barely breathe, explaining that destiny should have given humanity time to awaken their powers. But now it's all been recorded. This says, aiming the destruction of Yankees. Sunan is paralyzed, looking at the sky with amazement. Susanoo's a devastating psychic attack on our protagonist, whose force crushes nearby buildings. Inside the room, ground that thrown against the wall, screaming in pain from the force of the impact, quickly seals critical points in your ears, hearts and heart, panicking when she realized that her brother received the sonic wave fully.